I'm a security guard at Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, An Ordinary Security Guard. Mr. Hunter, what do you think are your advantages compared to other candidates? Asked the beautiful female interviewer Pepper Potts, looking at the handsome man in front of her. Just call me Scene. I think my advantage should be described as began good at sex. Scene replied with a smirk on his face. Pepper's face was dark, thinking what a weird answer this was. Hahaha, don't get me wrong. I mean rich experience, strong body and serious and responsible attitude. Scene explained with a smile. Pepper was a little speechless in his heart. The guy in front of him was really a bit confusing. I noticed that it was written on your resume that you were a 3-level bodyguard who specialized in protecting important people. Pepper continued to ask. Yes. Scene nodded. Stark Group also cooperates with major bodyguard companies. Judging from your resume, why don't you choose to apply for our bodyguard position, but come to apply for security? Pepper asked puzzledly. As you can see, because I'm as handsome as the faces of most male readers, I have had enough of the harassment from employers in my previous work experience. P.S. Both men and women. So now I just want to be an ordinary security guard. Scene shrugged helplessly. Pepper Potts looked at the man in front of her and fell into silence again. It was the first time she heard such a reason. She didn't expect that she would meet such a top-notch person when she went from the president's office to the human resources department to participate in a recruitment interview on a whim. Although this person is very handsome, there is no need to be so narcissistic, right? However, his resume is really something. As a former 3-level bodyguard, no matter what kind of task, the completion rate is 100%, the employer's praise rate is 100%, and the Human Resources Department has verified the authenticity of the content of this form point. So Pepper thought about it. It's just a security guard anyway. Why not spend a little money to hire such an experienced talent? Just when she was about to formally issue the employment notice to Scene, who was sitting upright in a suit, her phone rang. Excuse me, I need to take a call first. Of course, go ahead. Scene smiled professionally and raised his hand to indicate that he didn't care. Just as Pepper walked out of the conference room to answer the phone, Scene listened to the conversation on Pepper's phone outside and couldn't help but frown slightly, thinking, is it such a coincidence? It happened at this time. Scene in the conference room turned his head and looked at the door of the conference room, as if he saw Pepper's anxious face outside through the door. Outside the door after Pepper answered the phone, she learned that Tony's convoy was attacked. She first had an unbelievable expression on her face, and then she looked around and couldn't help covering her mouth with her hand to prevent her emotions from collapsing too much. The person who called her was her boss, Tony Stark's friend, James Rhodes, a colonel in the US Air Force. Pepper, hearing Rhodes is shouting in the receiver of the mobile phone. The emotional Pepper came back to her senses. Oh my god, how could this happen? Rod, aren't you with him? How is Tony? What's his situation now? Hearing Pepper's series of questions, Rod on the other end of the phone could only say, I can't tell you the specific situation now, but Tony was not found at the scene of the exchange of fire, so the military is now actively looking for him. You must stabilize the Stark group first, and be careful not to let the news spread widely. Even if the news is spread, don't let public opinion ferment. Do you understand? Okay. Hearing the news that Tony's life and death are uncertain, Pepper's answer can't help but have a hint of tears. Hey Pepper, calm down. Listen, I will definitely bring Tony back safely, I promise. After Rod hung up the phone, Pepper was at a loss for a few seconds, and then quickly sorted out her emotions. She then called the head of the Human Resources Department, ready to explain the interview just now, and then quickly deal with the more important business of the group. But she suddenly thought of the resume just now, which clearly stated, Scene Hunter not only has rich experience in security and escort, but also can easily infiltrate and rescue targets. He has never failed, and his employers have always rated him with 5-star praise. The hour manager who came over trotted over and waited anxiously for Pepper's instructions. He didn't know what happened to the goddess in front of him today. When his leader told him that Pepper Potts, the personal secretary of the group's big boss Tony Stark, was going to the hour department to participate in recruitment, he went crazy. Although Pepper's position is only the boss's personal secretary, her level is high. Have you ever seen anyone who can freely enter and leave the boss's mansion and take care of the boss's life and work arrangements? Maybe his leader has a backer behind him and can ignore Pepper, but he dare not. If the little girl tells the boss something, who will support his family of 8? While the hour manager was struggling with his inner struggle, Pepper had already made up her mind. She was a strong-willed woman, and she would do what she decided to do. So she waved away the hour manager who was looking down on her, sorted out her emotions, turned around and pushed the door into the meeting room. Mr. Hunter, our group has already understood your situation very well. With your personal ability, you are more than qualified for the position of security. Pepper walked towards the interviewer's seat while calmly speaking to Scene, who was sitting opposite her, but Scene looked at Pepper and said the turn she wanted to say later. Hearing Scene's interruption, Pepper did not feel any dissatisfaction. After she sat down, she looked at Scene and continued, I have a private commission and want to ask you for help. Scene heard this familiar opening remark and thought of his previous employers. He couldn't help rolling his eyes, but he knew that Pepper was not talking about that. Let me make it clear first, I sell my art, but not my body. WTF? Pepper, who was sitting opposite, looked at Scene with a puzzled look. What are you thinking about, brother? But she still sorted out her words and made a final confirmation to Scene. Mr. Hunter, if there is a person who is kidnapped by terrorists in Afghanistan, can you rescue him? Hearing Pepper's question, Scene did not answer, but tapped the table with his hands. The meeting room was very quiet. Pepper looked at Scene seriously, waiting for his answer. Do you have specific information about the mission? Scene asked. I can ask someone to send it to you. Pepper answered immediately after hearing Scene's voice. Mission. Reward. Good. To negotiate. Well, then I only have one additional request. What? Pepper unconsciously covered her collar. You have to hire me as a security guard. Do you have an obsession with security guards? Pepper stared at Scene across from her with wide eyes, but she finally nodded. Then, when does the mission start? Scene asked when he saw that he had already been hired. Now. Chapter 2. They are all talented actors. After Scene and Pepper reached an agreement, they planned to go to Tony's president's office with Pepper to further communicate the details. Who knew that the two of them actually met Abadiastan, the group's elder, on the way upstairs? Pepper, I'm sorry. I should have accompanied Tony on this transaction. Maybe this wouldn't have happened. As soon as Abadias saw Pepper, he walked up with a guilty face and pulled Pepper aside and whispered. Even Scene, who was standing 2 meters away, looked at Abadias' guilty face and had to praise. Good acting. Naive Pepper thought Abadia also got the news from the military. Seeing Abadias' guilty look, she didn't think much about it. After hearing Abadias' words, Pepper's emotions that had just been suppressed suddenly came up. Her body trembled slightly, her eyes gradually turned red, and she couldn't help but prepare to hug Abadia. Abadia looked at Pepper like this, and instantly realized that she had received the news as the two were whispering. Scene, who was watching, couldn't help but remind them, Miss Potts, can we finish our work first? Hearing Scene's words, Abadias' grief-stricken expression froze, and his hand, which was about to hug the beautiful young body in front of him, also stopped. What's the matter? And who are you? Abadia looked at the strange man in front of him, who interrupted his emotions with great difficulty, frowned and asked in dissatisfaction. Tony Stark is missing, and Abadiastan is now the largest shareholder of Stark Group. What's more, Tony's disappearance was originally planned by him. He just wanted Tony Stark to disappear forever, and then Stark Group would become his possession. At this time, in Stark Group, he felt that he was the king who had the final say, but he didn't expect that a fool would appear. Yes, Pepper, who was standing aside, finally reacted. She was about to tell Abadia that she had asked Scene to rescue Tony, but was interrupted by Scene's voice. I'm a friend of Miss Potts. She borrowed something from me before, and now it's time to return it. Pepper turned around and looked at Scene, who was staring at her anxiously after speaking, as if he was really afraid that she would run away. Really, Pepper? Do you need my help? Abadia turned his head in confusion and looked at Pepper with concern. Oh, yes, it's just a small matter. Don't bother you. I can solve it myself. Although Pepper didn't understand why Scene said that, she was not a stupid woman. Rescuing Tony was the first thing in her heart at this time. After just a moment of thinking, she chose to believe Scene's past experience. At worst, she could wait until Tony was rescued and then apologize to Abadia. She believed that he would understand. Well, don't worry too much. I believe the military will be able to find Tony successfully. Seeing that Pepper said it was not a big deal, Abadia was relieved. He didn't want to worry about such trivial matters that had nothing to do with the group. He was thinking about Tony now, so he whispered to comfort Pepper with red eyes. Then Abadia turned around and left without even looking at Scene and went to Tona's CEO's office. He had to hurry to carry out his next plan, seize power, since there was no good place in the Stark group now. Scene and Pepper could only leave temporarily. After the two of them left the Stark building, they found a coffee shop, and Pepper asked for a quiet private room with ease. On the way here, Pepper had contacted Colonel Rhodes and asked him to send all the information. Although Colonel Rhodes didn't understand why Pepper wanted to do that, he still promised to sort it out as soon as possible and send it to her. So Scene and Pepper waited quietly in the private room for news from Rhodes. Afghan, near the Air Force Base. Scene looked at the mission briefing sent by Rhodes. How is it? Pepper, who was sitting opposite, had been looking at Scene nervously until Scene spoke, and then she asked anxiously, and she didn't even touch her favorite coffee on the table. Well, I can't be sure for the time being. I have to go there first. You'd better contact Colonel Rhodes again. I have to go to the scene where the convoy was attacked. Okay, I'll arrange your itinerary right away and then contact Rhodes to let him pick you up. Pepper's secretary's professional nature was immediately exposed. You don't need to arrange my itinerary. I will solve it myself. And except for Colonel Rhodes, you'd better not leak my information to anyone else if you want to find Tony smoothly. Scene looked at the impetuous Pepper and hurriedly reminded her. Why? Just now I wanted to ask, why did you say that to Abadia in the group? Pepper was puzzled. She felt that if she could use the power of the group, shouldn't she be able to rescue Tony faster? Look carefully at the entire process of this attack. The enemy defeated the fully armed military convoy so easily and took Tony away unscathed. According to the briefing at the scene, there is only one possibility. What? They must have known the convoy's route in advance and set up an ambush. So either there is a traitor in the military or there is a traitor in your group. After hearing Scene's words, Pepper opened her mouth in disbelief. She was not a stupid girl, but she was just too concerned. After Scene's reminder, she naturally realized the problem. What? About me? And Tony? It's okay, don't worry. From the fact that the other party did not choose to kill directly and took Tony away, they must have a purpose. At least before they achieve their goal, Tony's life is safe. I just don't know how long we have left to rescue him. You must rescue Tony, please. As long as you can rescue Tony, I'm willing to agree to anything you want. Pepper looked at Scene with tears in her eyes and begged. Well, don't worry. Didn't we agree that you would have to hire me as a security guard for the group at that time? Okay, now calm down your emotions, and when we go out, you should pretend that there is no rescue. Don't let people see the flaws. I will report my progress to you on time. Scene instructed Pepper when the two came out of the cafe. Pepper had returned to her professional secretary look, and it was hard to tell that she had cried. After returning to the group, Pepper still showed sadness and worry in her eyes when she saw Abadia, which made Abadia feel more relieved. As for Scene, after the two said goodbye, he officially began to plan his trip to Afghanistan. Chapter 3. Bald people seem to be quite strong. Are you the person Pepper asked me to pick up? Colonel Rhodes, who had dark skin and was wearing a military uniform, looked at the man who seemed to be on vacation in Afghanistan with dissatisfaction. You are Colonel Rhodes, right? Hello, I'm Scene Hunter. Looking at Rhodes, who looked unhappy, Scene showed his professional smile and extended his right hand to show his friendliness. Rhodes did not shake hands with Scene, but squinted his eyes and looked at Scene, who was acting harmless in front of him, and said unceremoniously, "I don't know how you deceived Pepper, and I don't know what you want to do, but I want to remind you that this is Afghanistan." Scene saw that Rhodes had no intention of shaking hands with him, so he retracted his extended right hand and said coldly, "Please take me to the place where Tony Stark had an accident, and you don't have to worry about what happens next." Scene was originally a little disgusted with Rhodes' natural dark skin, and this guy's arrogant look made Scene completely unwilling to talk nonsense with him. Seeing that his warning was ignored, Rod wanted to send Scene back directly, but due to Pepper's repeated requests on the phone before, he could only say, "I will take you there. I hope you will be responsible for your own safety. The army does not have so much time to take care of you." Scene ignored him at all. After getting into the car with him, he said nothing and waited for Rod to drive the military vehicle to Tony's accident site. Then he got out of the car and never looked at Rod again. Rod sat in the car and watched Scene standing still. After getting out of the car, he felt that Scene was a liar and didn't know how he gained Pepper's trust. Rod thought that he should be merciful and park the car here to wait for Scene. Maybe the guy would not be able to pretend anymore and would ask to go back on his own initiative. While Rod was thinking this, Scene had already constructed everything about the attack in his mind through the photos of the scene sent by Rod before and the situation here. He walked behind a stone and looked at the traces of explosion fragments on the stone and the dragging marks on the ground. "Hey, the army has already searched. You can't find anything here. Let me take you back. You go back to China and find someone else to cheat." Rod shouted impatiently in the car, but no one responded. A few minutes later, Scene had just walked to the side and Rod could not see him anymore. Soon Rod's patience was exhausted. He pushed open the car door and got out of the car aggressively, ready to take Scene back directly. He didn't plan to waste time here anymore. He still had to pay attention to Tony's search and rescue situation. But when Rod strode behind the stone and was ready to scold, "Hey, you," Rod looked at the empty sand behind the stone and his dark face was stunned. "Hey, this is not a place to play games. Did you hear me? Get out of here quickly, you guy." Rhodes thought Scene was hiding on purpose to waste time, but when he searched around and didn't see Scene, he said in confusion, "WTF?" Scene, who disappeared from the scene of the attack, was at the highest point of a mountain range at this time. He closed his eyes, feeling the light and heat from the sun, but heard all kinds of sounds in his ears. Scene's face was calm. His brain was running fast, filtering out all kinds of invalid information, and finally, he found what he wanted. Just when Scene was about to make a move, he noticed something wrong. Scene turned his head and looked at the sparks that appeared out of thin air 3 meters behind him. The sparks were in a spiral state and continued to expand until the circular area in the middle was revealed. A bald woman in a yellow robe slowly walked out, with yellow runes flashing under her feet, allowing her to stay in the void. The wind at the top of the mountain was very cold, blowing her robes. Scene looked at the woman in front of him. He had seen many bald men, but this was the first time he had seen a bald woman. He didn't understand why she wanted to shave her head. Could it be that she really wanted to shave her head because she wanted to be strong and then become bald first? "Mr. Scene Hunter?" The gentle voice was like a spring breeze, as if it was ringing in Scene's ears, without being disturbed by the strong wind on the top of the mountain. "You can speak your hometown dialect. I understand it." Scene guessed who she was, so he opened his mouth and spoke fluently in the language of Guyi's hometown. If there were other beautiful Chinese people present, it would be difficult to imagine this scene. "Okay." Guyi's mouth corners were slightly bent. Without showing any surprise, she slowly walked in front of Scene in the void, stood on the top of the mountain with Scene, and then looked at Scene and continued, "Have you thought about the consequences of the person you are going to save?" Scene didn't quite understand what Guyi meant. He frowned and looked at Guyi. "I know that with your ability, saving him is just a piece of cake, but because you saved him now, it will cause changes in the future. Just like the scenery in front of us, it should have its own appearance, but A yellow rune suddenly appeared on Gu Yi's hand, and a strong wind from nowhere swept everything in an instant. The clouds in the valley were no longer the same as before. The strong wind did not have any effect on Scene. He turned his head and looked at the scenery in front of him, which was very different from before, and then said, I know what you mean, but even if it changes, what does it matter? It doesn't have much impact on me. Hearing Scene's irresponsible words, Gu Yi did not get angry, but continued, indeed, for an existence like you, even if the future changes, it will not have any effect, but it is not the case for those clouds and everything in this valley. After hearing what Gu Yi said, Scene was about to retort, but Gu Yi did not give him a chance. She stared at Scene and continued, you are very special. If you were supposed to exist in this universe, I should have seen our meeting today, when you were born. However, the fact is that until today, until the moment you just thought about it, I discovered the changes in the future. So I kept searching up and down along the long river of time, and then I found you. After saying this, Gu Yi turned around and looked at Scene with a smile, just like looking at a naughty child. So, you saw my future? Scene asked with a frown. Gu Yi did not give a specific answer but said, it doesn't matter what the future will be like. What matters is seeing. That Gu Yi did not continue. Scene could not help but frown. These magicians like to say half and hide half, and you can't ask them what they don't want to say. Aren't you the one who is responsible for protecting all this? Even if I change and cause some problems, you can come forward to solve them when the time comes. Don't tell me you can't do it. Scene found that Gu Yi's attitude towards him was very strange. It didn't seem like he would immediately eliminate the threat after discovering it, so he began to speak casually. Hearing Scene's words that he wanted her to help cover the bottom line, Gu Yi smiled helplessly. I'm not as powerful as you think. Then, why did you come to me this time? Chapter 4 Camotage. I just came to see you and remind you that if you don't want to expose yourself too early, maybe you should choose the time to save people, said Gu Yi. Gu Yi's words touched Scene's heart. Since he traveled to this world, he knew he was different from others. Since he was a child. At first, he thought he was a mutant, but later he found out that he was not. As he grew up, he gradually awakened to various abilities that were more and more like the Superman in DC Next Door. He was a little swollen and couldn't help wanting to rush to the moon sky, but then he thought about it. The water of the Marvel universe is still very deep, so he thought it would be better not to expose himself before he figured out what the universe is like. And being a hero is tiring. Okay. Don't you see that Azu has become so perverted? If Scene is really exposed, he will have to save this, and that at any time. If he runs into a purple potato spirit who is engaged in family planning, he may have to fight for his life. So Scene hid himself very well for the first 20 years or so. He basically didn't use his special abilities much, except when he was a 3A bodyguard, to ensure his 100% completion rate and 100% praise point. And he went to Stark Group to apply for a security guard, just to lean on the big tree for shade. So, after listening to what Gu Yi said, Scene thought about it and felt that what he said was indeed reasonable. He still had to let Iron Man be born smoothly, otherwise he would have to do all his work himself. Then being a security guard is really not a leisurely job. He has to save people all the time, and maybe even save the world. No, it's too uneconomical. Let Tony Stark stay here for a while, but I'm here. You can't let me go back like this, Scene said embarrassedly with his hands behind his back and his head tilted to look at Gu Yi. Gu Yi seemed to know what Scene would say. She glanced at the pretentious Scene with a bad temper, then raised her hand with a ring on it and summoned the shuttle door she had just walked out of. This thing is really convenient. Scene, who saw Ancient One performing magic again, looked at the other side of the light door curiously and whispered quietly. That was the place where Ancient One practiced camotage. Want to learn? I'll teach you. Ancient One suddenly turned around and looked at Scene, who was looking forward to magic, as if as long as Scene nodded, she would immediately teach him everything she knew. I still can't do it, you know. I'm afraid of trouble. Scene felt that if he agreed to Ancient One might pass the position of Supreme Sorcerer to him and then run away immediately. Ancient One, who failed to pass the blame, shook his head helplessly, and then took the lead to walk into the light circle, and Scene followed behind her. After passing through the light circle, Scene looked at the room curiously. It was in full viewpoint. There was basically nothing else in the whole room, except the bed and table. You so poor here? Is it too late for me to leave now? I don't want to be an ascetic with you, Scene said with a look of disgust. Don't worry, there is everything here, and you don't have to practice asceticism like them. Practicing asceticism is just a personal choice. I know you don't want to take over the position of the supreme sorcerer, but I can still teach you magic, Gu Yi said, while lighting a stick of sandalwood. Is there such a good thing? Scene was obviously a little unconvinced. Gu Yi smiled, then said, you have a good rest, we can start tomorrow. Then he turned and left, and walked out of the small room. Scene looked at Gu Yi's leaving figure, and couldn't help thinking in his heart, it seems that I should be an important role in the future, otherwise Gu Yi would not be so friendly to me. In this way, Scene lived in Kamatage, and Gu Yi fulfilled her words and really began to teach Scene magic. We draw powerful energy from other dimensions of the multiverse. Scene watched Ancient One in front of him play with those spells like a flower, and couldn't help but stretch out his hand to imitate. Ancient One looked at Scene's movements with a hint of appreciation, and then continued to demonstrate and explain. With Ancient One, the strongest wizard on earth, Scene's magic progress can be described as 1,000 miles a day. It seems that it was wrong to say that Superman was a magic insulator on the internet before. But Superman's magic affinity was indeed lower than his own physical properties, or Scene's own magic affinity was higher. Is the Supreme Mage here? Mordo, who was walking towards him, asked coldly. Well, inside. Are you going to ask the Supreme Mage questions again? Scene, who had just finished practicing with Ancient One, was about to go to the library to take a look, and met another little black Mordo at the door. After getting Scene's answer, Mordo didn't continue to pay attention to Scene, and walked straight in. After Mordo came to Kamatage, he learned that Scene had been able to receive individual guidance from the Supreme Sorcerer, and his jealousy continued to grow. Since he first learned about Kamatage, he was full of admiration and respect for the Ancient One. He felt that he was the most devout believer of the Supreme Sorcerer, so he was very dissatisfied with Scene's usual careless attitude. Scene looked back at this impolite little black man. Did he offend him in any way? It seems that this guy will be a villain in the future, right? Why not just give him a knife now, to save the Ancient One from worrying about it, as a reward for her teaching him magic. Just when Scene was thinking about whether to kill Mordo, Ancient One, wearing a long black robe, came out with Mordo. Looking at Scene standing there with a strange look, Ancient One glanced at Mordo, who was lowering his eyebrows and looking obedient, then looked at Scene and said, didn't you say you were going to the library? Why don't you go? He blinked at Scene. He is still useful. After receiving the signal from Ancient One, Scene naturally couldn't intervene again. He also glanced at Mordo next to him. You are lucky. After Scene left, Ancient One smiled slightly, and then said to Mordo, what did you ask me just now? Life in Kamatage is not hard, but a little boring. People here study magic and study magic. These wizards are too serious. The only one that Scene finds interesting is Wang. This guy looks serious on the surface, but he is very stuffy inside, which can be seen from the songs he listens to. Hello, Wang. Why are you being drafted again? Didn't I tell you before that this job is not easy? You may lose your head if you don't do it well. Scene walked into the library and saw that the original administrator was not there. Wang was sitting behind the table playing songs on his mobile phone. Fly forward, wait for the rose of love. Wang raised his head and looked at Scene expressionlessly and reached out to turn off the music on his mobile phone without showing any expression. Scene recalled the music played on his mobile phone just now and couldn't help but reach out and point at Wang, praising him. Good taste, brother. Then he looked up and down at Wang's huge body. But can you fly? Wang didn't say anything and looked at Scene with an expression of what's wrong with you? We are so familiar with each other. Can't you say a few more words to me? Let's have a good exchange of feelings. Scene's upper body was trapped on the table and looked at the stinky faced Wang opposite. Wang took a deep breath and Scene thought he finally moved him. But have you finished reading all the books? Chapter 5 The Cannonball That Turns. Scene stayed at Kamatage for more than 2 months until Guyi found him. I've taught you almost everything I can teach you. The rest depends on your own understanding of magic and hard work, Guyi said while pouring tea for Scene. But why do I think you are hiding something from me and not teaching me? Scene raised his eyebrows and looked at Guyi. Ancient One teaches white magic, but he knows that the reason why Ancient One can stay in the world for a long time is that she has been constantly drawing power from the dark dimension. Didn't you already read it in the library? Guyi replied rudely. Peeping on others is not a good habit. You won't peek at me taking a shower, will you? I don't have that much time, and I'm afraid of needle eyes. The king told me, Guyi said calmly while holding the teacup. This damn fat guy actually snitched on you. Scene looked in disbelief. He didn't expect that Wang, with thick eyebrows and small eyes, was actually a spy. Gu put the teacup on the table and made a clear voice. The king is just performing his duties. Although the magic knowledge is not prohibited from viewing, it is full of dangers, so he feels it is necessary to report it to me. I also want to remind you, don't get lost in power. Control your power instead of letting power control you. After Guyi finished speaking earnestly, he looked across at Scene, who had returned to normal, took out a hanging ring from his belt, and handed it to him. This is for you. It's time. Go ahead. Scene took the hanging ring with both hands and bowed to Guyi. I'm going to say goodbye to Wang Dao. Gu. Yi hummed softly, then closed his eyes and began to meditate. When Scene saw this, he stood up and went out. He looked down at the hanging ring in his hand. He was taught and given as a gift, which made him a little huggy. Is the Sorcerer Supreme here? Mordo's sudden voice interrupted Scene. Scene looked at him angrily. If he didn't want to kill him, he could just curse him. Ah, you are a Peter? You only know this sentence? Nico's brain capacity is really small. Guyi is meditating inside and has no time to talk to you. After speaking, he ignored Modu's reaction and turned around to leave. The reviled Modu looked at Scene's back, the resentment in his eyes almost overflowing, but he thought of the power of the Supreme Mage and his longing for magic, so he could only suppress his inner emotions, and left with a puff of sleeves. What did you just say? Wan looked at Scene in disbelief. Scene ran into his room just now, and as soon as he came in, he said that he was leaving. Wandu suspected that he had heard wrongly and quickly turned off the song, Heart, Fly on his phone. I said I was leaving, and I came here to say goodbye to you, Scene said while pouring himself water and sitting down. Oh. Wan raised his right hand and covered his mouth. Ah. You laughing? Are you so happy that I'm leaving? Scene still saw the corners of Wang's mouth that couldn't suppress the upward movement. No, I think of happy things. What? Happy thing? My brother's wife has given birth. In the end, Scene silently warned Ichiban Wang, telling him not to work for the librarian again, and then opened the mirror space and walked in. After entering the mirror space, Scene flew towards the cave where Tony was kidnapped. In the mirror space, he could do whatever he wanted without worrying about being discovered by others like in the real world. When Scene arrived at the cave where Tony was kidnapped, there were terrorists armed with guns on alert outside the cave, but they couldn't find Scene in the mirror space at all. So Scene swaggered into the cave, and after passing through the iron gate, he happened to see Tony Stark, a level 10 blacksmith, wielding a hammer. Well, he's still alive and looking good. Scene judged Tony's condition and then looked at Ethan, a level 10 welder who was spot welding on one side. This guy seemed to have died a little hastily, so he might as well reach out to save him. At this time, Tony, the blacksmith who was swinging his hammer, suddenly stopped. There seems to be something wrong. Do you feel it, Ethan? Tony frowned and looked around. What's wrong? Ethan focused on the work at hand. He had lost his family and everything. Now he only hoped to use his welding skills to help Tony escape from here. It seems like something is watching us. Tony reached out and held up the hammer, shaking it in front of him, but unfortunately it didn't touch anything but air. Ah, you talking about the overhead monitoring? Also, your mask needs to be tempered. Ethan didn't feel anything, so he reminded aloud. Oh, shit. Tony quickly put the mask into the water to quench it, almost breaking his blacksmith sign. Then the two of them got ready to escape, and with the help of Ethan, Tony slowly put on the armor. Scene, who was in the mirror space, was also keenly aware that the terrorists outside the cave had discovered the abnormal behavior of the two of them and were coming here with guns in hand. Because the terrorists coming outside spoke a small language, Ethan could not communicate to buy time for Tony's armor. The terrorists outside the door looked at the two of them and wondered what they were doing inside, so they tried to open the door, but were sent to the west by a bomb hanging on the door after the explosion. Ethan started loading the operating program on the computer according to Tony's instructions. Seeing the slow progress bar on the screen, Ethan looked at Tony deeply and picked up the terrorist's gun on the ground and ran into the passage. While Tony kept shouting, Ethan kept shooting at the wall of the cave, scaring the terrorists who rushed over and retreating. But when he rushed to a junction of the passage, he found that there was already a row of terrorists pointing guns at him. Ethan, who was pointed at by a dozen terrorists, was stunned in place. At the moment when those terrorists shot at him, he felt that he could finally be free. Wife, children, I'm here to find Jonathan, who closed his eyes and waited for death, did not feel the pain of the bullet hitting his body. He felt that his body suddenly became warm, and there was a breeze on his face. He felt that he was in heaven. But when he opened his eyes, he found that he was actually in the desert outside the cave. Just when he was full of question marks, a strong dizziness came up, and he immediately lay on the sand and vomited. In the cave, seeing Ethan disappear inexplicably, the bold boss suspected that it was the Allah he believed in who showed up. Just as the bold boss was about to kneel down and pray devoutly, Tony came out in armor. Has anyone seen Ethan? It's the bald guy who is with me every day. Fire. The bold boss felt insulted and shouted loudly to his confused subordinates. Bullets from various guns poured on the Mark I armor. Tony raised his arms to block the two holes on the mask while rushing into the crowd. Seeing that the situation was not good, the bold boss immediately hid aside and observed. Tony rushed into the crowd in armor and shot left and right, one punch after another, but accidentally used too much force and his left arm was stuck in the wall. A little Karami took out a pistol and was ready to shoot Tony in the head, but, bounce, little Karami widened his eyes in disbelief, and the bullet was bounced back and blew his own head. Just after Tony killed some terrorists and scared away a few little Karamis, the bald boss hiding on the side also found that Tony's armor could not be broken by bullets. He loaded a rifle grenade and walked out with a heartless step, ready to let Tony taste the explosion. Bang. After the explosion, Tony and the bold boss looked at each other and looked at the big hole blown out on the wall. It turned out that the rifle grenade had already locked on Tony, and even Tony himself accepted his fate. Who knew that the grenade magically turned a corner and exploded on the wall on the side? Chapter 6. These days, no one believes the truth. This is impossible. The bold boss saw the big hole made by the turning shell. In such a short period of time, he witnessed two miracles with his own eyes. He felt that God must be playing a joke on him. Tony, who had come to his senses, took this opportunity to quickly tear off the armor on his arm and fired the missile on the mechanical arm at the bald guy. Unfortunately, there was no guidance system, and Tony's aim was not accurate. The missile he fired also exploded on the cave wall next to the bald guy like the grenade just now, but the rubble from the explosion still buried the bald guy. Then Tony walked out of the cave, transformed into a flame warrior, and burned a group of terrorists and weapons from his start group. Scene saw that the situation inside and outside the cave was basically settled, so he opened the portal and walked in. In the desert not far from the cave, Ethan, who was lying on the sand and vomiting bitter bile, saw a ring of Mars suddenly appearing in front of him, and a person walked out of it. He felt that he should have died in the cave, otherwise how could he have such a dream in broad daylight? However, before Ethan asked, he saw that the cave in the distance turned into a sea of fire, and there were continuous explosions. A huge mushroom cloud rose from the sea of fire. Then a missile-like figure flew out of the mushroom cloud, and after climbing violently to the sky for a while, it turned into an arc and fell to the desert on one side. Ethan looked at the figure falling over there and muttered a little uncertainly, "Yes, it's him. Let's go, Dr. Ethan. Let's go find him." "Wait, who are you? How did I get here? Did you bring me here? Scene did not answer, but snapped his fingers, and the two disappeared from the spot and instantly moved to the point where Tony fell in the distance. Don't do that again, please sir. After saying this, Ethan, who was teleported by Scene, immediately lay on the sand and vomited. I'm sorry, I forgot that you can't stand the squeezing feeling brought by teleportation. Scene said apologetically to Ethan, who was lying on the ground point. Although Tony was protected by the armor and the shock absorbing effect of the sand, he still felt that his arm seemed to be out of control after falling, but fortunately his life was not in danger. Just when he was about to climb out of the sand, he suddenly heard the conversation between Scene and Ethan behind him. Ethan? And who are you? Tony looked at Scene vigilantly. Hello, Mr. Stark, I'm Scene Hunter. 2 months ago, I was hired by Miss Pepper Potts to come here to carry out the rescue plan for you. Now the mission is basically completed. Scene introduced himself. Really? Then I really want to thank you for helping me build the armor and blowing up the cave. Tony mocked. He felt that if Scene really came to save him, he couldn't help at all. He had to save himself. Scene was not angry when he heard Tony's mockery. After all, he was locked up for so long and almost died. Anyone would be full of resentment. Scene took out the satellite phone and called Pepper in New York. Hello, who is this? Hi, Miss Potts, this is Scene. Hearing Pepper's name, Tony's eyes immediately straightened up. He jumped out of the sand and said to Scene, give me the phone now, I will believe you. Scene smiled and shook his head, making a gesture to him to stay calm. Oh my god, Scene, you finally contacted me. Rod told me that you disappeared inexplicably before. I thought you were in trouble. Are you okay? How is the situation now? Pepper said like a machine gun on the phone. Calm down, Pepper. I'm fine, and I have good news for you. What? Scene then handed the phone to Tony Stark, who was looking forward to it. Put it on the ground. I'll take it myself. Tony said arrogantly. He didn't like others handing things to him, except Pepper. Scene raised his eyebrows and looked at him with the satellite phone. It seems that you don't really want to talk to her. Do you want me to tell her directly? Tony, with a tangled face, thought of Pepper's worry for him and could only suppress the discomfort in his heart, walked up and took the phone from Scene's hand and glared at Scene unhappily. Just when Tony and Pepper were reporting their safety and caring for each other, Ethan finally got up from the ground. Who are you? I should be considered a security guard who has not yet joined the Stark group. Ethan thought Scene would say that he was a mage or a wizard, but Scene said he was a security guard or a member of the Stark group, and he hasn't joined yet. He looked at Scene with a faint smile on his face and was confused. Are you bullying an honest man who is easy to deceive, Mr. Stark? Please tell Miss Potts to let your good friend Colonel Rhodes track the location of the satellite phone in your hand so that we can find our location. Scene shouted to Tony, who was still flirting with him. No. Tony was angry. After Tony hung up the phone, he looked at Scene deeply for a few seconds and then asked the question. Who are you? Scene couldn't help rolling his eyes. No one believed the truth these days. More than 2 months ago, I went to Stark Group to apply for a security job. I happened to meet Miss Pepper Potts. She hired me and asked me to come and rescue you. Did I make it clear enough? So, you are a security guard of Stark Group, so I'm your boss? Tony grasped the key point in Scene's words and looked at Scene proudly. Scene smiled inexplicably and said, are you sure you can be the boss of Stark Group now? Tony frowned when he heard Scene's words. What do you mean? You will know when you go back. You hiss. Tony's movement was too big and pulled his injured arm. Ethan came up to help him check the injury. Scene glanced and said directly, the left shoulder is dislocated and the arm has a slight fracture. You need to get treatment as soon as possible. Ethan observed for a while and said, let me do it. Scene walked over and grabbed Tony's arm. Hey, Pepper, why are you here? Scene suddenly looked at Tony's back with a surprised look. Tony turned his head immediately when he heard the word Pepper, and Scene took the opportunity to grab his arm and pushed it upward. Okay, you help him deal with it again. Fuck. Damn. Couldn't you tell me in advance? Tony said with gritted teeth. He seemed to see him too milky just now. Ethan originally thought that scene was going to cast a spell on Tony, but he didn't expect to start physical therapy directly. He hurried forward to check Tony's arm and found that the dislocation was indeed fixed, and now he just needed to rest. Scene glanced at the two people and asked, "Does anyone want to drink cold beer?" 2 glasses of cold beer suddenly appeared in his hand and handed one to Ethan, looking at Tony and said, "You are a patient. It's better not to drink." Tony was going to say something mean, but when he saw Scene conjured 2 glasses of cold beer out of thin air, he swallowed his saliva and said blankly, "I can be healthy." Chapter 7. Drink some bee wine and pee. Yeah. It's great. Tony was lying on the sand enjoying sunbathing, holding a beer glass in one hand, and the beer in the glass that had not yet been drunk filled up automatically like a small whirlwind, regardless of whether it is true or not that you said you were the security guard of my group. Now I have decided to officially hire you as my personal bodyguard. How about you becoming my personal bodyguard? My other bodyguard Happy will definitely like you. Originally, Tony planned to leave here quickly to avoid the remaining terrorists coming to the door, but after Ethan informed him and learned about some of Scene's mysterious abilities, he suddenly changed his mind. "If I agree to your promise, then I will be stealing that Happy's job. Do you think he will still like me?" Tony thought of Happy's dutiful character. "By the way, do you want a cheeseburger?" Seeing Tony's embarrassed look, Scene had no choice but to change the subject. Tony's eyes lit up when he heard about cheeseburger. "Oh, yeah." Ethan, who had been lying on the side longer than Tony, sat up when he heard the cheeseburger squirming and said he wanted one too. While the three of them were enjoying themselves in the desert, 2 armed helicopters were flying towards them at full speed. Rhodes on the helicopter was very worried about Tony's condition. After nearly 3 months of torture, he couldn't imagine what Tony might become. He kept urging the pilot to speed up. When the helicopter finally arrived at the satellite phone's positioning point, all the soldiers were stunned. You sure they are not here for vacation, sir?" A heavily armed soldier looked at the 3 Scenes who were enjoying themselves and waving to them on the sand below and asked Rhodes, who was also confused next to him, "You crazy? Just stay here and you won't be afraid of those terrorists coming back again. And where did these beer and hamburgers come from?" Rhodes got off the helicopter and ran over with an angry and worried look on his face. Said, "Don't worry about these details. Rod, do you want a drink?" Tony was already drunk with unlimited refills of beer. Rhodes gave him a disgusted look, then asked a few people to get on the helicopter and leave. "Wait." Tony, who was pulled up by Rod, suddenly said, then pushed Rod away and ran to the side. "What are you waiting for?" Rhodes looked around with question marks on his head. "He probably wants to pee." Scene looked at Tony's incessant movements and explained, "He peed after just drinking so much. He has a bit of kidney failure." Seeing that, Tony started drawing a map on the sand just as Scene said. Rhodes rolled his eyes helplessly. Ethan, who originally wanted to join Tony, immediately stopped and clamped his legs as soon as he heard those 2 words from Scene. After taking an armed helicopter to the Air Force Base and transferring planes, the few people finally successfully returned to the beautiful country. Pepper and Happy were already waiting at the Air Force airport. After receiving the new Scene, Tony and Ethan, who had changed into clean clothes, stepped off the plane. Tony saw the stretcher pushed by the medical staff next to him and immediately waved his hand to refuse. Just kidding. He's in great shape now, isn't he? Tony walked straight towards Pepper, who was standing there. The 2 of them had clearly been flirting with each other on the phone before, but now they met in person, but refused to show it. The 2 pretended to be serious. Scene smacked his lips when he saw it. After teasing Pepper, Tony looked at Ethan aside and asked him if he was willing to come to the Stark group, guaranteeing good treatment. "I still can't save Tony. I have lost my family. I thought I would die in that hellish place. This is a relief. Moreover, I was able to save the life of the famous Tony Stark before he died. It's a great merit." But Ethan glanced at Scene vaguely and continued, "Since God spared me my life, I decided to use the remaining time I have to save more people. The same goes for you, Tony. I hope you don't waste this time." a hard-earned new life. After Ethan said something sincere, he walked up and hugged Tony. Then when he hugged Scene goodbye, he whispered thank you, and then left under the leadership of the base personnel. Tony looked at Ethan's leaving back, and remembered the scene in the cave where he rushed out desperately to buy himself time. Then he looked at Scene. If it hadn't been for him, Ethan might have really died there. Thanks to the security guard you found this time, Tony said to Pepper. Of course, my vision has always been accurate, Pepper replied confidently, and then she turned to look at Scene. Scene, thank you very much for rescuing Tony. Hey, I saved myself, okay? Tony said unconvinced, but looking at Pepper's eyes, he had no choice but to curl his lips. Don't be so polite, just remember to pay. Scene waved his hand and said nonchalantly, let's go. I've made an appointment with the hospital to check you first. Pepper said to Tony from the side. Examination? What examination? I'm very good. I was locked up in that dark place for 3 months. Now I just want to do one thing. Pepper thought of Tony's previous affairs and thought he wanted to find 2 more young models. So she rolled her eyes at him angrily. You are really enough. What are you thinking about? I'm talking about holding a press conference. You're not pure of mind, girl. Tony looked at Pepper and joked. Pepper didn't bother to pay attention to him and directly opened the door of the back seat of the car, asking him to get in quickly. You come with us too. Tony pointed at Scene. As the security guard of the group, you have to be responsible for maintaining the safety and order of the press conference. Scene looked at Pepper standing by the car door and asked her opinion. Tony's affairs were basically arranged by her, but after all, Tony was the nominal boss, so after receiving Tony's eye signal, Pepper could only nod to Scene. Scene could only speechlessly open the door of the co-pilot and sit in. Now that we are here, what can we do? With Happy's superb driving skills, they quickly arrived at the press conference site, which was already crowded. Abadia also rushed over as soon as he received the news that Tony was rescued. He cursed in his heart while waiting with reporters outside the venue. After seeing Tony coming down from the car in high spirits, Abadia tried his best to suppress his inner emotions and went forward to greet Tony with a fatherly smile on his face. When he saw Scene coming down from the co-pilot and showing him a meaningful smile, Abadia's heart skipped a beat. This guy seemed to be Pepper's friend. What did his smile mean? Could it be that he found out about my murder in an instant? Several questions lingered in Abadia's mind, but the reporters at the scene were immediately excited when they saw Tony appear, and he had no time to think about it, so he could only take Tony and his group into the venue first. After entering the venue, Tony was ready to go on stage to speak, and Scene stood outside the reporters. His previous habit as a bodyguard made him scan the circle and did not find any threats, so he began to appreciate different triangles. This pink, this white, this sky blue, oh wow. This one is a bit stuffy. Black thin line, How did a 4-cornered thing sneak in? Scene looked up at the man in front of him. The smile that covered his whole face was as warm as spring, and the shiny forehead made him instantly remember who he was. Hello, Mr. Hunter, I'm Agent Phil Coulson. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, Tony Stark, the Egg-Laying Rooster. I belong to the Strategic National Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau. Excuse me, what is a Strategic National Defense? The Strategic National Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau. What? Logistics Support Bureau. The Strategic National Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau. What? National Strategic Support Bureau. The good old man Coulson looked at Scene with resentment. He saw that Scene was deliberately making fun of the name of their unit. Just a joke. Don't be angry. The Strategic National Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau. This name is really smelly and long, Scene said with a smile. Indeed, we are trying to simplify it. Hearing Scene's complaints, Coulson was not angry, because every time he introduced it to others, he had to say such a long string and his tongue trembled a little. Excuse Me, what do you want to talk to me about? We know that it was you, Mr. Hunter, who rescued Mr. Stark, so we want to ask you some questions. I was commissioned by Miss Potts to find the place where Mr. Stark might be kidnapped through various clues, but I did not rescue him. When I found Mr. Stark, he had already saved himself. Then we contacted Miss Potts via satellite phone, and finally got help from the military. Scene told the truth, but he just deleted some clips. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. After listening to Scene's description, Carlson found that it was roughly the same as what he knew. What was missing now was how Tony Stark saved himself. Just at this time, Pepper came over. After Carlson greeted Scene, he ran over to communicate with Pepper. Scene looked at Tony, who was calling on everyone to sit on the ground like him. After he made the shocking statement about the decision to close the weapons department of Stark Industries, the mood on the scene reached a climax. Reporters stood up one after another, trying to dig out more shocking news from Tony. Seeing this, Abadia hurried forward and pushed Tony away from the podium. Scene wanted to take the opportunity to sneak away, but he didn't expect Pepper to come to him. Scene, I want to ask you to continue to help me. Pepper looked at Scene with a pleading expression. Okay, tell me if I can do it. After Scene successfully rescued Tony, Pepper's trust in Scene rose sharply. Now Tony suddenly announced the news of closing the weapons department of Stark Industries. Although Pepper still couldn't understand it, there would inevitably be many problems later, so she wanted Scene to protect Tony for a while. WTF? How did he become a bodyguard after all the twists and turns? Can I still get a job as a security guard? Scene looked at the pitiful Pepper in front of him with a constipated expression. Forget it. Since I accidentally saw you when I was looking at the triangle before, I'll just treat it as paid content. Remember to pay. The last reward has not been settled yet. Also, let me make it clear that I will not obey Happy's orders. Scene said with his hands spread out. Okay, I will arrange it. I will definitely satisfy you in terms of the reward. As for Happy, you don't have to worry about him. Pepper said immediately when Scene agreed. After saying goodbye to Pepper, Scene immediately caught up with Tony, and Happy next to him looked at him defensively. Ah. You here to be my bodyguard? Pepper arranged it, right? Tony said meanly. You two are really in sync. Scene rolled his eyes at Tony speechlessly. Happy, who was standing on the side, immediately looked at Scene with vigilance when he heard the word bodyguard. He felt that he might lose his job. He turned around and looked at his boss with resentment, as if questioning why Tony had fallen in love with someone else. Tony, who was originally in a mess at the press conference, was in a much better mood. He patted Happy on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, man, you will always be my bodyguard." After getting Tony's guarantee, Happy ran to drive happily. He originally planned to use his senior status to order Scene around, but Scene ignored him. Seeing that there were still a few reporters chasing him, he could only start the car quickly and take Tony and Scene away from the press conference. Happy drove all the way to the Stark Industries factory. Tony Stark, who had just made a bold statement at the press conference, was actually not calm in his heart. He said he would shut down the weapons department, but he had not yet decided what to do in the future, so he ran to the factory and stared at the huge arc reactor in front of him. Hey, new guy. Outside the factory, Scene leaned against the car bodyboard. Hearing the voice beside him, he turned his head and looked at Happy, who was looking proud. Are you calling me being Tony Stark's bodyguard? Is not that easy, you know. Really? Scene looked at him with a raised mouth. Let me teach you a few moves. I used to be a professional boxer. Happy planned to teach Scene a little lesson while teaching, so that the new guy would know who is the boss. I don't think it's a good idea. What if something goes wrong? Scene looked at Happy's fat body. He was afraid that if he accidentally used too much force, he might directly knock him off. Hahaha, don't worry, I will be very careful not to hurt you. Come on, hit me. Happy? Question mark, question mark, question mark. This is the first time I have heard such a cheap request. Looking at Happy's confident look, Scene really didn't want to say that he was afraid that if he punched him, he would immediately kneel on the ground and beg Happy not to die. Seeing that Scene still refused to take action, Happy added, then I will attack and you will defend. As a qualified bodyguard, defense is also very important, regardless of whether Scene agreed or not. Happy punched Scene in the face. He smiled proudly, as if he had already seen the embarrassment of Scene getting a nosebleed. When Tony came out, he saw the two will definitely trust him more. Why hasn't this kid fallen down holding his nose? Happy felt a little strange. His fist did not feel the same impact as before. Only then did he realize that his wrist was grabbed by Scene. He tried hard to pull away, but Scene's hands were like iron pliers, holding his wrist. Happy's face turned red, and he couldn't pull his hand out. Scene looked at Happy's painful look, and then he let go when he felt it was almost done. Happy was still pulling hard without any preparation, and ended up sitting on the ground with his buttocks. Just when Happy got up and wanted to say something to save face, Abadia hurried over after handling the press conference. He stared at Scene, took a sip of cigar, and asked the familiar "How is Tony inside?" Then turned and walked into the factory. Tony had a discussion with Abadia about the arc reactor, and he thought Abadia learned from Rhodes or Pepper that he had successfully shrunk the arc reactor. Abadia looked at Tony's chest and suddenly felt a little lucky that those stupid terrorists didn't kill him. No, the chicken at home had laid another golden egg. Then Abadia showed his fatherly face, played the emotional card with Tony, comforted him, pretended to support his decision, and asked him to keep a low profile recently, so that he could. The people on the board of directors took care of it, and finally Abadia sent Tony off to the car with great affection. After getting in the car, Tony thought about it and said to Scene, "Congratulations, this should be the easiest deal in your working life. Abadia will handle everything on my behalf. I will try to keep a low profile recently." "That's fine. I don't want to be in the same room with a grown man every day." Scene, who was sitting in the passenger seat, heard Tony's relaxed tone and replied, "Do you know who used to spend the night with me?" Tony replied angrily after hearing Scene's words. Chapter 9. Do you want to eat the meat that is delivered to your door? Homeland Strategy is a little. The name is really long. Phil Coulson came to their agency's New York branch, ready to report the latest news about Tony Stark's attack and successful escape to his old boss, Nick Fury. Nick Fury stood in front of the huge French window in the office, overlooking the busy figures of the members in the New York branch, but his mind was not on the scene in front of him, but immersed in Coulson's report. Especially the seemingly ordinary person Scene Hunter. According to the information they have, Scene Hunter is an ordinary person and there is nothing special about him. However, he has achieved remarkable achievements in his bodyguard career. What is even more puzzling is that when his career was at its peak, he chose to quietly retire and joined the Stark Group as a security guard. Later, he accepted Pepper Potts' private employment and went to Afghanistan alone to rescue Tony Stark. Although there is a lot of evidence that Scene was not actually involved in Tony Stark's escape, Nick learned through some special channels that Scene was not in Afghanistan in the past 2 months. This made him think deeply. Where did Scene Hunter go in those 2 months? How did he know Tony Stark's location? This person must have some secrets. Call Agent Romanov back. Nick Fury looked at the crowd below, his shiny egg head reflecting the light under the overhead light, and he felt the undercurrent deep under the calm surface of New York. "Okay, sir." Phil Coulson thought Nick called Natasha back for Tony Stark, but he didn't know that Nick was for the most inconspicuous person in his report. Because Tony said that he didn't need Scene's personal protection, Pepper could only exchange contact information with Scene so that he could be notified as soon as possible when needed. Scene returned to his home in New York, and when he opened the door next door suddenly opened. "Hi, Scene. Long time no see." A surprised voice came. Scene turned around and looked at the owner of the voice. Medi was wearing an orange vest with a slightly lighter long-sleeved shirt, blue jeans and black high heels. The necklace on her neck fell into the deep ravine along her collarbone, and her brown shawl hair diffused a faint fragrance. After the surprise, Medi immediately realized that she was wearing 2 ordinary clothes today. If she had known that she would meet Scene, she should have put on makeup before going out. "Hi, Medi. It's been a long time. 3 months. How are you doing recently?" Scene looked at the beauty in front of him and felt a little better. "It's still the same, you know, taking care of Peter, working and so on." Medi hesitated and then said, "What about you?" Why did you suddenly go out for so long? I almost thought you moved. May's tone even carried a little resentment. If I move, I will definitely let you know. This time I went out for some work issues. The place I went to was far away, so it took a little longer. Scene explained softly. Is it going well? Hearing Scene's words, I will definitely let you know if I move. May's heartbeat quickened a bit. It's going well, that's good. May smiled sweetly. After the two fell silent, they looked at each other, and a hint of embarrassment lingered in the air. Well, you, the two wanted to say something at the same time, to interrupt the awkward atmosphere, and then stopped and looked at each other carefully. You go first. Scene smiled and raised his hand to signal May to continue what she just wanted to say. I have to pick up Peter. You know, he's going to finish school soon. May pointed to the corridor on the side and said, but her eyes never left Scene. Oh, yes, then you should go quickly. Don't let Peter wait too long. Scene raised his hand and looked at his watch. It was indeed time to go home from school. Then, I'll go first. Bye. May walked outside, stretched out her hand to gather the hair by her ears, and waved goodbye to Scene. Bye. After saying goodbye to May, Scene turned to open the door, but his ears heard May's constant turning back, and he also felt May's sight. Until he opened the door and went in, Scene's eyes could see May looking back from time to time through the wall. Alas, being too handsome is also very troublesome. Tony has replaced a brand new arc reactor in his mansion in California. This kidnapping incident made him realize how vulnerable he is when the crisis really comes, and all the so-called money and status he has are useless. If the terrorists didn't ask him for help, I'm afraid he would have reunited with his parents long ago. This also made him determined to strengthen and improve the armor project he had made in the cave. Mecha is a man's romance, so the first person he thought of was his good friend Rod. When he went to the Air Force Base with Joy to invite Rod to join, he didn't expect to be criticized. Before he even said what the project was, Rod, who was a soldier, didn't understand why Tony suddenly became a humanitarian. When he heard Tony say that the new project was not developed for the military, he interrupted him immediately and left with a disappointed face. But what he didn't know was that Tony felt very disappointed when he saw that his friends didn't understand him. After the kidnapping incident, he really didn't know who to trust. Just when Tony returned to his mansion to work diligently on scientific research, a new resident moved into Scene's apartment building. Hello. Scene had officially joined the Stark group a few days ago. Recently, he went to work on time every day. After all, workers have a working spirit. Just when he was about to go out that day, he saw several burly workers carrying furniture in and out of the corridor. Hearing the movement behind him, the woman standing in the corridor watching the busy movers turned around and looked at Scene, who had just left, and greeted him. Scene looked at the new neighbor in front of him, who was wearing black tight jeans, brown tight leather jacket, and curly hair tied up casually, talking to him with a smile on her face. While responding, he wondered in his heart how he met her. Could it be that he was discovered? Hello, I just moved here. My name is Natalie Northman. Originally, Scene was just skeptical when he saw this face, but after hearing this name, he subconsciously looked down. Yeah, it's her. I'm Scene Hunter. You can call me Scene. I live over there. If you need help, you can find me. Scene pointed to his door behind him. The two chatted for a while like real neighbors. Scene said he had to go to work, and then he said goodbye and left. The target has been contacted. Natalie smiled and said goodbye to Scene, then took out the phone in her pocket and dialed the number. She only said one sentence and hung up. Scene, who had already walked out of the apartment building, raised the corner of his mouth when Natalie hung up the phone. It seemed that he was coming for him. Chapter 10. Kyo's mother gave birth to Kyo. When he moved to this apartment building, he met May and his nephew Peter. After hearing their names, Scene guessed their identities. However, Peter is not the chatterbox neighbor in the future, but he is very talkative at a young age, which Scene can see from the few times he has met him. Standing at the door of Stark Group in a uniform, Scene did not think about his lovely, beautiful and charming old neighbor, but the new neighbor he met 2 days ago. Black Widow. I have to say, although she is not as tall as May, Her figure is really good. Well, just like the beauty in front of him. She is convex and curvy, trembling, and swaying when she walks. Oh my. Isn't this her? Hi. Scene, it's really you. I couldn't believe it at first, but I really recognized you when I got closer. The beautiful woman with reddish brown curly hair and black high-heeled shoes covered her mouth and trotted over to greet Scene with a look of surprise. Yes, Natalie. What a coincidence. If eyes could kill, Scene would have died countless times. There was no way Natalie was too eye-catching. Especially those men who went in and out of Stark Group. They all thought, how could such a charming beauty be related to a security guard and should be with handsome elites like them. Jealousy made them separate. You look pretty handsome in this uniform. Natalie talked to Scene generously. The black security guard standing on the other side of Scene looked at Natalie's figure, drooling on his uniform, and wanted to rush forward to lick Natalie's feet. Yeah, I just joined Stark Group a few days ago. What about you? Are you here to do business? Although he knew that Natalie's target was him, since you wanted to play. Scene was not in a hurry anyway, so he would play with you, who is not an actor. It's such a coincidence. I just joined Stark Group, and I'm in the legal department. Scene also smiled with a look of surprise. That's really quite a coincidence. The two felt that people coming in and out were looking at them, so Natalie said goodbye to Scene embarrassedly. After entering, she looked back every 3 steps, which was called reluctant. Brother, is that girl your friend? She looks so cool. After Natalie left, Scene turned around, and the black security guard next to him spoke with a wretched face. Damn, if you didn't open your mouth, I wouldn't know you had a row of teeth. I thought it was a shadow standing next to me. It's a bit of a coincidence that the new neighbor I just met a few days ago also works here. Scene said with a hooked mouth. When Ziohei heard that they had only known each other for a few days, he immediately said that he would treat Scene to a meal after work. Seeing his wretched eyes, Scene knew what he was up to, and Scene agreed. After thinking about it, who wouldn't eat for free? If you don't eat, you're a fool. Who knew that? When it was time to get off work, Natalie appeared again. Scene, are you free tonight? Do you want to have dinner together? She looked at Scene with her bright smile. This beauty trick is a bit low level, so direct. It seems that this Black Widow doesn't pay much attention to Scene. She didn't even think about pulling it, and was ready to show her true colors. Scene glanced at Ziohei, who was almost dying of anxiety next to him, without saying a word. I just made an appointment with my colleagues. Natalie raised her eyebrows, as if she didn't expect Scene to refuse. It's okay. How about we go together? Before the two of them spoke, Ziohei, who had been eavesdropping, came up, and the smell made Natalie unconsciously move her feet to the side. After receiving the mission, Natalie originally thought that it would be easy to seduce a young man with her beauty. In the eyes of a top agent like her, Scene is just a bodyguard, even if he is the most powerful bodyguard in the world. The previous contacts during the move and the encounter at work were all fine, but who knew that Scene actually rejected her dinner invitation now, which made her doubt her charm. Seeing the lecherous size of Ziohei next to her, Natalie regained her confidence. Am I the best? But what's the matter with this Scene? Is he gay? I don't care. Scene said that he didn't have to pay anyway. Then, let's go together. Natalie continued to show her smile. The exquisite face, fair skin, round and full, deep and bottomless ravines, perky buttocks, slender legs, and cute toes exposed by the tip of high heels, all made Ziohei feel hot all over, and Scene even felt something quietly standing up. Then, let's make it clear. I'll come see you after get off work, Natalie said, and went back to the building. Looking at Natalie's departing back, the black guy next to Scene was about to turn into a wolf. If the earth hadn't had some attraction, he would have been able to fly up to the sky. After get off work, Natalie didn't know whether it was intentional or unintentional. She found a restaurant that didn't look cheap and ripped off Blackie for a good meal. Scene found it funny to see Black is constipated and distressed. Look, when he paid the bill. I don't know if it was because he was ripped off that Blackie was more motivated to take Natalie down. He directly suggested that the three of them go to the bar to enjoy the nightlife. Natalie waited and thought it would be nice if she could get Scene drunk, but she didn't express her opinion directly, but looked at scene point in the bar. Dynamic music, dim lights, watching the crowd swaying in the dance floor. Scene had already rejected the fourth girl who came up to him to chat up. There's nothing you can do about being handsome. Scene boredly took a sip of strong liquor, which was like drinking water to him. With his body, it would be fine, even if he drank alcohol directly. Don't ask. If you ask, he's just bored and tried it himself. Natalie came to the bar, drank some wine, and went down to dance. Ziohei naturally followed her in the dance floor below. Every time Ziohei and the men around Natalie wanted to get close to her and take advantage of her, she would always resolve it without a sound, and Natalie's eyes kept glancing at Scene intentionally or unintentionally. Why don't you go down and dance for a while? An abrupt voice appeared in Scene's ear. Huh? Didn't you go dancing with him? Scene looked at Natalie, who suddenly came back and stuck to him with an innocent look on her face. He said he had something to do and left first, so let us have fun on our own. Natalie raised her glass and clinked it with Scene. Did Ziohei leave? Of course not. How could he leave without getting anything? In fact, Scene saw that Natalie might have felt annoyed because of Ziohei's constant harassment, and then followed him to the alley behind the bar. Ziohei looked at the messy, dark and empty alley and thought that Natalie liked this kind of exciting tone. Looking at Natalie, he could hardly hold back his gunpoint. Just when he hurriedly took off his pants and prepared to enjoy it, several burly men in black suddenly appeared and took him away, and then Natalie returned to Scene's side. Alas, poor guy, I don't know if I can see him again at work later. Chapter 11. If she hits you, hit her back. After drinking a few gulps of wine, Scene went to the dance floor with Natalie at her invitation. Watching Natalie flirting in front of him and the two people's bodies touching softly when they turned around, Scene also felt that his body began to heat up. What a fairy. However, it was precisely because of Natalie's seductive dance that several men with bad intentions gradually surrounded them. After one of the black men looked at Scene, he felt that he could easily control him, so he took the initiative to come forward and began to prepare to touch Natalie. Natalie, who had her back to Scene, also curled her lips just right. So a big show began. Just when the black man stretched out his hand, Natalie slapped the black man angrily and quickly hid beside Scene. The beaten black man stared blankly at his outstretched hand. I didn't even touch it. Okay. He looked up at Natalie clinging to Scene, looking so pitiful. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He punched Scene. Brother, are you sick? If she hits you, hit her. Why hit me? Scene sighed as he looked at the fist that was slowly enlarging in front of him. Sure enough, it is not without reason that beauty is a disaster. The passionate music and lights in the bar were still going on. The crowd outside the dance floor was still twisting their bodies without knowing what was going on. Scene stood there and looked at the several big men lying on the ground beside him. Could they have been killed by too heavy a punch? After he glanced around and found that they were all still alive, Natalie came up and pulled him to run quickly. She was really pretending. After the two left the bar, Natalie was still holding his hand with a lingering fear. Ha ha ha, so exciting. You are quite good. Natalie looked at Scene with stars in her eyes. It's okay. Scene pinched her little hand, and Natalie let go of Scene's hand a little embarrassedly. When the two of them returned to the apartment, Natalie looked at Scene with eyes that were almost threaded. She stood at the entrance of the corridor with her legs crossed and hesitantly tilted her head to indicate her room. Do you want to go to my house for more drinks? Just when Scene was thinking about whether to spend a passionate and beautiful night, there was a door opening behind him. Scene, you're back. Hey, who is this? Scene. And Natalie turned around and saw Mary, who had just opened the door and was holding a bag of garbage in her hand. These days, Mary also learned that a new neighbor had moved into their apartment, and it was the kind of existence that made all the men in the apartment extremely excited. Hello. I'm Natalie. I just moved in not long ago. Natalie felt Mary's somewhat hostile eyes and took the initiative to introduce herself. Hello, I'm Mary. The two shook hands gently. What are you doing? Mary looked at the two curiously. She smelled the smell of nightlife on Scene and Natalie. Natalie is actually from the legal department of Stark Group. Isn't it a coincidence? We had dinner together tonight and just came back from drinking at the bar. Scene spread his hands. Really? Such a coincidence? Mary looked at Natalie with an incredible look on her face. Natalie's appearance and figure were very aggressive. Now there was such a relationship. Her heart began to beat a little. With Maya's sudden intervention, Natalie naturally couldn't invite Scene again. She could only say goodbye to the two one by one and return to her room. Scene listened to Natalie's phone call reporting the task in the room over there. After a brief greeting with Mary, he returned to his apartment. Mary looked at the empty corridor after the two left, looked at Natalie's room, and then looked at Scene's room, and turned around, and returned to her home with the garbage. Aunt Mary, didn't you take out the trash? Why did you bring it back? Peter, who was taking a drink from the refrigerator, looked at the trash bag in Mary's hand when she came in, and his mind was full of questions. Have you finished your homework? Go to bed. Do you want to be late tomorrow again? Peter looked at Aunt Mary, who was angry after asking 3 questions in a row, and ran into the room quickly, not knowing what he said wrong. The next morning, Scene met Peter and Mary, who couldn't open their eyes when he went out, and greeted them warmly. Hi, Peter. Hi, Mary. Hi, Scene. This is Peter. This is Mary. Peter, hurry up. You're going to miss the school bus. Mary gave Peter an expressionless order and reached out to grab Peter's collar and turned away. By Scene. Peter felt that his feet were about to leave the ground. When did Aunt Mary's strength become so strong? By Scene watched the two leave, tapped his head, and couldn't figure out what was going on. The days of being a security guard are so leisurely. Scene stood at his post board in the sun, feeling the flow of energy in his body, and heard a few Stark Group employees whispering in his ears. Hey, have you heard? The group held a board meeting today. What? Are you going to be a director? Go to hell. Don't you think the group is going to change? Don't worry. What does it have to do with us small employees? We are still like cattle and horses. Oba, why did you make that proposal? After coming out of the conference room, Pepper had been suppressing her emotions until she could no longer hold back. She stood on the apron and questioned Abadia angrily. What do you want me to do? Can't you see the expressions of the shareholders? Tony's decision not only harms the interests of the group, but also the interests of the shareholders. If I don't do something now, when they unite to fight against us, the group will really fall apart. Abadia explained to Pepper the words he had thought of long ago. Pepper felt that, although Abadia's words made sense, his proposal to kick Tony out still made her feel that it was too much. And this scene happened to be seen by Scene, who was standing guard on the apron. Hi, Pepper. Abadia, who was waiting for the helicopter, turned his head and frowned at the little security guard who spoke without permission. Huh? Why is it you again? Hi, Scene. Pepper replied listlessly. She was really in no mood now. Abadia kept squinting at Scene. He remembered the inexplicable smile Scene had given him at the last press conference. What are you looking at? You old glass. Seeing that Pepper had no desire to reminisce, Scene continued to enjoy his sunbath, turning a blind eye to Abadia's malicious scrutiny. Aren't you Pepper's friend? Pepper then remembered that she had told Abadia about this before because she wanted to keep the rescue of Tony secret. But she had nothing to be afraid of. Scene didn't get in through connections. With his qualifications, he was more than qualified for this position. Yes, he passed the group's recruitment and is now a member of the security department. Abadia glanced at Scene with disdain and no longer took him to heart. When Tony was solved and he had power in his hands, he would see if he could still laugh. Pepper, you have to know that Howard and I founded the group together. How could I do anything to hurt Tony? The reason I did that was just to temporarily calm the anger of the shareholders. You have also seen the impact of Tony's previous remarks on the group. I had no choice. Abadia started to play the emotional card again. He was not ready to completely break up with Tony yet. He still coveted Tony's Accra actor. Pepper's emotions gradually calmed down. The two then boarded the helicopter together and flew towards Tony's mansion. Chapter 12 Road Killer. Abadia was frustrated by Tony and failed to obtain the reduced arc reactor technology as he wished. The Mediterranean experts he personally invited had never made any progress in this field, which made his patience gradually run out like sand in an hourglass. Finally, at a charity party in Los Angeles, when Tony showed up and questioned him why the company provided weapons to terrorists, he tore off his hypocritical mask. Tony woke up from his dream and realized that all this was manipulated by a Badia behind the scenes. Tony recalled the words Scene said to him in the desert that he could not make the decision, and Pepper also mentioned to him that there might be a traitor in the company. He has been reluctant to point the finger of suspicion at Abadia because he has no relatives in this world, and Abadia is at least half of him. Now that the wolf has revealed his identity, Tony can no longer find any excuses. He drove his sports car back to his mansion at lightning speed, quickly assembled his armor, and rushed towards the town called Jamila that he had heard Ethan mention with anger. Since he couldn't stop what the company did, he had to destroy those weapons as foreseen. He was like a fish in water during this period. Ever since May ran into him and Natalie drinking, May really ignored him in the first few days. However, it seemed that May had changed overnight and warmly invited him to her home. To be honest, the walnut and candied date bread made by May was really disappointing. Fortunately, Scene had an iron stomach and could easily handle the dark cuisine, but he had to rinse his mouth constantly after eating. However, the relationship between Scene and May developed rapidly like a rocket. Before, they were just ordinary neighbors, but now they have made a qualitative leap. Natalie also kept flirting with him, and her ambiguous little movements were like leaves in the breeze, rustling and continuous. If things continued like this, Scene might not be able to suppress his inner impulse and accidentally shoot. That night, Scene was awakened by Pepper's phone call in his sleep. Hearing the noisy voice on the other end of the phone, he reluctantly got out of the warm bed. It turned out that not long ago in the Stark group, Pepper followed Tony's instructions and copied the confidential information of the transaction with terrorists on the computer in the president's office. And Pepper also found that Tony's kidnapping was also planned by Abadia. His real purpose was not to kidnap, but to kill Tony directly. Unfortunately, those terrorists wanted to use Tony, which gave Tony the opportunity to escape. However, Pepper's behavior was also discovered by Abadia. Just at this time, Coulson came to the door. Pepper took the opportunity to escape and directly exposed all of Abadia's conspiracies to Coulson. After learning the whole story, Coulson decided to personally lead the agents to follow Pepper to the Stark factory to find out the situation and arrest Abadia. However, at this time, Abadia had already obtained the arc reactor from Tony and installed it on his ironmonger armor. The agents brought by Coulson were like chickens and dogs in front of Abadia's ironmonger armor under the desperate cover of the agents. Pepper, who ran all the way to the factory gate in high heels, received a call from Tony. Tony. Oh my god. Abadia is crazy. Pepper looked at the factory with lingering fear and wanted to tell Tony what had just happened, but was interrupted by Tony. Pepper, listen, leave now and call Scene to ask him to help. Walter? Scene. Why? No. Time to explain. Just do what I say. Unfortunately, before Pepper could make any move, she felt the ground shaking. She turned around suddenly and saw Ironmonger, like a ferocious beast, destroying the factory floor and drilling directly out of the ground. Girl, where do you want to go? Listening to the devilish mechanical sound coming from Ironmonger and the electric mosquito coil that kept turning on her raised arm, Pepper was immediately frightened and screamed. Just when Pepper thought she was about to die, Tony flew over from the sky like a flash of lightning and knocked Ironmonger out with a thunderous force. Pepper looked at Tony in the armor and Abadia in the Ironmonger armor with concern. They rolled out onto the road like a rolling stone. Then she remembered what Tony had just said and quickly took out her phone to call Scene. Hahaha. Tony, look at my modified armor. I really love this thing you designed. Ironmonger raised a braked car with both hands. The road was full of traffic. Because of the fierce battle between the two of them, several accidents had occurred. Jarvis, start the chest cannon. Looking at Abadia with the middle door wide open. The reactor on Tony's chest was like a bright star, lighting up instantly, and a dazzling light sprayed out, suddenly knocking Ironmonger out. Unfortunately, the damage caused by this blow was minimal. There was no way. He was wearing a beggar version made in the cave before, and there was not much energy at all. After Ironmonger was blown away, Tony was quick-eyed and caught the car falling from the air. Just when Tony put the car down, the female driver in the car seemed to be frightened by a ferocious beast. She screamed desperately and stepped on the accelerator frantically. The high-powered car was like a wild horse that had broken free from its reins, and it started to run wildly on the road with Tony on its back. "Madam, calm down. Calm down. Brake. Brake." The high speed of the car was like a violent tornado, and it directly rolled Tony under the car scene, who suddenly appeared beside Pepper, witnessed this thrilling scene, and couldn't help but sigh. "Road killers are so scary. You'd better not drive in the future, Pepper." "Oh my god. Scene, how could you?" Pepper turned her head to look at Scene with a frightened face, and then stared blankly at the portal behind Scene that was slowly shrinking and disappearing. "Shh, I'll go help Tony first. Remember to pay me overtime. It's time to get off work now." Oh, okay." Pepper nodded repeatedly in a daze, and exclaimed again when she saw Scene disappear in front of her eyes, "Hey, do you need help?" The abrupt voice suddenly appeared in the ear of Tony, who was pressed under the car body and kept moving forward. Tony didn't know how Scene managed to keep the same speed as the car, but he didn't have the heart to think about it at this time, because his armor was being dragged forward, and sparks kept splashing under the squeeze and friction of the car and the road. "Get me out quickly. This woman is crazy. It's terrible." Scene snapped his fingers lightly, and Tony got out from under the car, and the car also ran away on the road. "Thanks." Tony, who escaped from the clutches of the female driver, was about to say something when he felt his stomach rolling. He quickly lifted the mask and lowered his head to take a deep breath. "It will be fine in a while. It's just the sequelae of teleportation." The Ironmonger, who was blown away, was now running towards the two of them. Is it you? Two little bugs? It's just right. I'll send you to the west together this time." Seeing Scene standing on the road, a badass mechanical voice full of resentment and disdain came from the Ironmonger. He didn't know why Scene appeared here, but in his eyes, he was invincible after wearing the Ironmonger armor, and no one could stop him. Be careful. Chapter 39 Overlord? Are you sure HEN-039's not Iron Turtle? Tony, who had just vomited up his dinner, noticed that Abadia was rushing over here, so he quickly put on his mask again. As soon as he turned around, he saw Ironmonger holding a motorcycle and smashing it towards Scene. Looking at the fierce motorcycle, Tony felt that if he was hit, he might not be unscathed even in his combat suit, so he quickly reminded Scene to be careful. Looking at the motorcycle that was smashing like a sledgehammer, Scene snapped his fingers again without changing his expression, and his figure disappeared instantly with Ironmonger like a ghost. Tony stood alone on the road and watched the motorcycle that Ironmonger used as a weapon fall to the ground. Looking at the fragmented appearance, I'm afraid that even a level 10 repairman cannot save it. "Sir, they are at the factory. Mr. Hunter should have used the special space ability again." The gentle reminder sound of the intelligent butler Jarvis came from the mask, and Tony reacted and flew towards the factory. Scene stood on the roof of the Stark factory like a sculpture, looking lazily at the kneeling Ironmonger in front of him. Abadia in the operation room had vomited everywhere after the space transfer just now. The smell could be smelled through the armor. "It's so disgusting. I have to wash my eyes when I go back." There were a lot of cars and people on the road outside the factory just now, so Scene quickly changed his position. Otherwise, in his eyes, the so-called Ironmonger was just like paper, which would break at the touch. Wait. Just when Scene was about to make a quick decision and then go back to continue his date with Dream Girl, Tony flew over and landed next to him. "Why did you do this, Stan?" Hearing Tony's question, Abadia suppressed the discomfort in his stomach. Ha 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 ha. "Why? You ask me why? Hollywood and I founded this company together. Why is it you who owns the company in the end? If it weren't for me, you would have ruined it all these years." I will never allow my hard work to be ruined by you like this. Although I don't know how you got me here. As long as I'm wearing the Ironmonger armor, what can you do to me? There is only one ending for you today. Before Abadia finished speaking, he wanted to control the Ironmonger to attack again. However, as soon as he stood up, 2 scholar trays instantly pierced his chest, and even the arc reactor was not spared. That's it. Ironmonger, even a turtle shell is tougher than you. Scene's eye sockets gradually returned to normal. Tony looked at the Ironmonger, who fell down in front of him blankly, sighed helplessly, and then turned his eyes to Scene. What did you just do? Was it magic? How could it shoot out of your eyes? Just pretend I haven't been here. You can handle the rest yourself. Scene didn't answer him, but yawned, opened the portal like a magician, and went straight back to his home, leaving Tony, who was itching for the raise just now, alone on the roof of the factory. The next day, major media news reported what happened in Stark's factory last night. At the press conference, Rhodes came forward to explain the incident from the military. Tony in the backstage looked at the newspaper in his hand and called the armor he wore yesterday Iron Man. He thought the name was not bad, although the material of his suit was several grades higher than steel. Carlson came over and handed Tony his alibi for last night. With Tony's past Playboy image, it was normal for him to go out to sea and have a party. Did you really kill Abadia stand by yourself yesterday? Carlson stared at Tony, who was receiving Pepper's Macup to cover his facial wound. No, it was my bodyguard. Just as you said, he faced Abadia's armor with his flesh and blood, and finally won. What do you think? Tony rolled his eyes speechlessly. Carlson thought about it, and felt that, if it was really as Tony said, then the so-called bodyguard could only be the idol in his heart. But it was obvious that Tony's bodyguard was not. Well, your alibi is perfect, and Abadia's death was also treated as a plane accident. Just read the script given to you. Carlson thought that everything would go according to plan through Tony, but he didn't know Tony at all. This guy was not a quiet guy. Tony then backstabbed at the press conference. He shocked the reporters and admitted to the fact that he was Iron Man, causing an uproar. All the reporters rushed forward with their long guns and short guns to interview this explosive news. After get off work, Scene sat on the sofa and watched Tony's pretentious I'm Iron Man on TV. This should be no problem now. Everyone's attention should be attracted by this playboy. Knock. Knock. Scene opened the door and looked at the lovely girl at the door after hearing the knock. Hi, Natalie. What's wrong? Natalie looked Scene up and down calmly and said with a smile, hi Scene, I heard you like Chinese food. When we had dinner before, my colleague in the legal department told me today that there is a new restaurant in Chinatown that seems to be pretty good. I plan to try it. Do you want to come with me? Natalie was ordered by Nick to investigate whether Scene was related to the incident at Stark Factory yesterday. According to their territory. Oh no, it has now been renamed SHIELD according to all the information available to their bureau. There were many questionable aspects at yesterday's battle scene. For example, how Abadia Stain disappeared in full view of the public, and someone at the car accident scene claimed to have seen a man, but no one could recognize his appearance, and the fatal wound on Abadia Stain's chest was not like a wound that could be caused by the weapon of Tony's suit. Nick Fury suspected that the mysterious man who appeared at the scene was the one who really killed Abadia, and his instinct told him that man was Scene Hunter, so he gave Natalie instructions to ask her as soon as possible unearth the secrets of Scene. Naturally, Scene couldn't refuse the beauty's invitation, not to mention that according to Natalie, the owner of this new restaurant was a pure Chinese. The Chinese restaurants that Scene had been to before were all opened by owners who catered to local tastes. The so-called Chinese food was just a gimmick, and some of the owners were not even from China. After hearing about this restaurant introduced by Natalie, he thought he could check it out. Zan. G. Scene and Natalie stood on the street, looking at this small store. The neon sign above the door was bilingual. Looking at the familiar text, Scene felt that this wave should be stable, right? Chapter 14. What do you want to do? Welcome, both of you. The moment Scene and Natalie stepped into the restaurant, a middle-aged man with a kind face and a smile came forward and greeted them warmly. Scene's eyes swept through the restaurant, and most of them were Chinese faces. He asked in a standard and fluent Chinese, "Are you the owner of this store?" Hearing this, the middle-aged man stared at Scene with wide eyes and looked at him in surprise. After 2 seconds, he said, "I'm the boss. The name Zanji is taken from my last name, boss." Zan continued to smile and said to Scene, "If I hadn't seen your face and heard what you just said, I almost thought I met a fellow countryman." Natalie, who was standing aside, was also surprised. Her beautiful eyes were full of surprise and amazement at this moment. As an agent, Natalie certainly knows Chinese, but compared with Scene, she speaks like a babbling elementary school student. She has always felt that Chinese is the most difficult language to learn. No doubt about it. Scene explained with a smile, "I lived there for a while. During that time, I fell deeply in love with Chinese food. Unfortunately, I have been to several so-called Chinese restaurants before, but the taste of their dishes is not authentic enough." There was a hint of regret in his words at this time. The middle-aged boss quickly took over the conversation and said excitedly, "Haha, then you came to my place today. I opened this restaurant because I couldn't adapt to the Chinese food taste here. Don't worry, I promise to let you eat authentic Chinese food today." As he said, he patted his chest with confidence. Scene had a pleasant exchange with the owner of this Zanji restaurant. Perhaps because Scene spoke Chinese well, Boss Zan warmly invited them to sit in and decided to cook an authentic Chinese meal for them himself. "What were you talking about just now?" After the two sat down by the window, Natalie pretended not to understand the conversation between the two and asked, "Nothing, just chatting about some things in his hometown. The boss saw that I spoke Chinese so well, and he said he would cook for us personally." "Oh, really? It seems that I still benefited from your help today." Natalie laughed and teased, "But I didn't expect that you can speak Chinese so well. I used to be a bodyguard and took over some tasks there." Scene explained briefly, "These are things that others can easily find out." Natalie recalled that the information she had read about Scene before was indeed true, and then she changed the subject and asked, "Did you read the news about Stark Group today?" "Ah, you talking about the group factory last night or the fact that our boss admitted that he is Iron Man?" Scene's expression was very calm. "Anyway, these things are now flying everywhere. He heard people talking about it on the way here just now. My colleague told me that what happened at the factory yesterday was not that simple. It seems that more than just our boss was present." Natalie looked gossipy. After she finished speaking, she observed Scene without revealing her expression, trying to see something from the changes in his expression, but Scene didn't take it seriously at all. "Really? Didn't the news say that there was still a bodyguard of his? We didn't hear anything about the security department today, but some people said that several security colleagues at the factory were seriously injured." "What's that smell? Why is it so fragrant?" Natalie wanted to continue to ask Scene, but suddenly she smelled a fragrance. Scene took a deep breath of the fragrance coming from the back kitchen, and then proudly boasted, "This is the taste of authentic Chinese food." Natalie couldn't help but close her eyes. Her upturned little nose twitched, greedily breathing in the fragrance in the air. "If you want to eat authentic Chinese food, you are welcome to bring your girlfriend to my place anytime." After the meal, Boss Zan enthusiastically sent Scene and Natalie out, holding Scene's hand and said, "Oh." Scene glanced at Natalie next to him with a little embarrassment. Natalie also looked at him with red cheeks. Boss Zan just spoke in English, and now she couldn't pretend not to understand. Seeing Natalie's coquettish and shy appearance, Scene could only smile and nod to Boss Zan, acting like a big boy whose mind was seen through. After saying goodbye, the two returned to their apartment in Queens. This time, Mei didn't come out to interrupt, and Natalie invited Scene again. Scene followed Natalie into her apartment and glanced around the room. That looked extremely tidy. Is this the agent's room? There are quite a lot of equipment. The room is also decorated quite like that. I only have whiskey or red wine here. Which one do you want? Natalie turned around and asked Scene to sit on the sofa, raising her eyebrows and asking with a little flirtation, "Whiskey, add some ice." Natalie nodded and walked into the kitchen, taking out the whiskey that had been prepared long ago from the refrigerator and pouring it into the wine glass, while taking out her equipment from the secret compartment on the wall and wearing it on her wrist, then holding 2 glasses of wine. twisting her hips and smiling as she walked towards the living room. She had already thought about it when she came out of the restaurant in Chinatown. After this period of contact, she really couldn't see anything abnormal about SYN. Even his special skills were, because he had worked as a bodyguard. But her old boss insisted that SYN must have a problem. Since she couldn't get him to confess, she could only torture him, which she was good at. Cheers. Natalie handed the wine glass to SYN, who was sitting on the sofa, and then twisted her butt to sit next to SYN. While drinking, her plump body gradually pressed against SYN. Feeling the body gradually approaching, and the fatal softness, SYN swallowed a mouthful of iced whiskey, squinted his eyes, and turned his head to look at Natalie, who was gently rubbing him, and said, "You are playing with fire, you know. I only know that iced whiskey can't suppress me. I don't know if you can do it." Natalie looked at SYN with a dazed look, put down the wine glass, and sat directly on SYN, her hands wrapped around SYN's neck, and her breath with the smell of wine and aroma sprayed on SYN's face. "Can I understand that you are provoking me?" SYN gently nudged Natalie's upturned nose with the tip of his nose, feeling the plumpness on her thighs and the hot body pressed against her, and said with heavy breathing, "What do you want to do?" Natalie continued to tease. Damn. Want. At the moment, when SYN kissed her, Natalie twisted her wrist around his neck and activated the equipment she had just put on her wrist. SYN felt something rub against his back neck, but now the arrow was on the string and had to be shot, so he didn't bother to pay attention. Natalie, whose soft lips were blocked, thought that SYN's body would immediately go limp, but SYN's offensive became more and more fierce. What's going on? The equipment expired. Wait. I can't wait. Natalie, who was still planning to resist, was directly suppressed by SYN's huge force, where Natalie wanted to say something, but SYN blocked her mouth with a triangle. The word "one night" is omitted here. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15. You bastard, please behave better. The morning sun shone in through the living room window, and the bodies entangled on the sofa had just fallen asleep. Even Natalie's transformed body could not withstand the ups and downs of the night. No, it was always up, not down. Feeling the warmth of the sun, SYN opened his eyes comfortably. Natalie curled up in his arms, her curly hair slightly red in the sun spread out. Natalie's cheeks, which had not yet faded from the blush, rested on SYN's chest, and her whole body was rising and falling with his breathing. Just as SYN raised his hand and gently rubbed her back, Natalie's eyelids twitched, slowly opened her eyes, and then seemed to be dissatisfied with the glare of the sun, and closed them again. The kitten in his arms hummed softly. "Good morning, SYN." Natalie now feels a little scared when she recalls the madness of last night. She had been through so many missions in the past, with so many bullets and ambushes, and she had survived all of them safely. Last night was the first time she felt that she was really going to die. SYN was going to reach out to take the wine that he hadn't finished drinking last night on the coffee table, but Natalie, who was quick-eyed and quick-handed, reached out and pulled him. "Don't." "What's wrong?" SYN was a little surprised. "Yesterday, it splashed inside. If you want a drink, I'll go get you a new one." Natalie's fair cheeks blushed even more. SYN was stunned for a moment, until his hand touched the still damp carpet. He realized what Natalie was talking about. Then, "Go and get some water quickly, and pour me a glass by the way, thank you." SYN raised the corner of his mouth and teased. Natalie was furious when she saw SYN's mean look. He actually treated her like that yesterday. She slapped SYN on the chest, and Natalie supported herself with all her strength. She wrapped herself in the blanket on the sofa and staggered to the kitchen. As soon as she entered the kitchen, Natalie began to check the equipment on her wrist. After checking it left and right, she found that there was no problem. Then why didn't it work last night? Did it fail? Impossible. She has never failed before. In the end, Natalie could only blame SYN for his good luck. "I'm afraid that the bracelet suddenly went crazy last night. After all, this situation is not impossible. In fact, Natalie fell into a misunderstanding. Her equipment bracelet can release a strong electric current in an instant. Once hit, even some large beasts can't bear it. If Scene really got hit, but still acted like nothing happened, then his physical strength is too terrible. But because of Scene's BO force field, Natalie felt Scene's body was warm and soft when she touched it, which affected her judgment, so she finally concluded that there was something wrong with her equipment. However, it was not completely fruitless yesterday. At least Natalie determined that Scene's physique must be different from ordinary people, at least better than hers. Finally, Scene went to work to punch in with a refreshed spirit. Natalie said that she had to take a good rest today and asked for a leave. After Scene left, Natalie immediately contacted the Black Salted Egg. How is it, Agent Romanoff? Have you found anything, except for the physique being different from ordinary people? There is nothing to find for the time being. Natasha was going to report everything that happened last night before calling, but for some reason she suddenly changed her mind. After a second of silence, Nick Fury continued, "Keep observing, sir. Why are you so sure that there must be something wrong with him?" Natasha was a little confused. Nick Fury did not answer Natasha's question. If there was any reason, it was that he had never believed in anyone. Tony Stark is worthy of being Howard's son. His character is even worse than his father's. You should stay in Stark Group for the time being. If anything happens, you can provide nearby support. I always feel that the New York matter is not over yet. Nick Fury did not dwell on this issue, but changed the subject. Okay, sir. Natasha is professional. Since Nick did not say anything, she did not ask any more questions. Well, and Scene Hunter should not give up any clues. Got it, sir. After hanging up the phone, Natasha looked at the bracelet on her hand and fell into deep thought. Scene smiled as he listened to the conversation between Natalie and the Black Salted Egg in the apartment. It was worth the effort he put in last night. It seems that there is still some effect. However, the Salted Egg has been doubting himself all the time. It seems that he has to think of a way. Scene's smile slowly disappeared, his brows slightly frowned, and he thought about countermeasures that temporarily calm New York. Is also brewing a new wave of storms as Nick Fury predicted. After Bruce Banner and his ex-girlfriend Betty Ross escaped from Betty's father, General Ross, at Culver University in Virginia, they decided to go to New York to find a way to completely cure Bruce. When the two were about to enter New York, they had to abandon the pickup truck they picked up from the roadside because of the identity checkpoint on the road. After bargaining with a middle-aged man at a port, they successfully arrived in New York by boat. Just as the desperate couple rushed to grab an college in Harlem, New York, an uninvited guest also came to the New York Police Department. Police Commissioner George Stacy suppressed his inner dissatisfaction and looked at the arrogant General Ross in front of him. It was almost time to get off work, and George Stacy was planning to kiss and hug his lovely daughter after handing over his shift and going home, but the guy in front of him showed up and shamelessly asked their police department to help catch the fugitive. What's more infuriating is that General Ross didn't let their New York Police Department participate at all and only asked them to lead the way. He said that if he didn't take into account the impact, he wouldn't come to deal with George at all, and he went straight to arrest people. As for the information of the fugitive to be arrested, General Ross refused to reveal it to George at all, only saying that it was very dangerous and that this matter was not something that they, the police, could handle. George Stacy suppressed his anger. If he hadn't taken into account General Ross's military identity, he would have slapped him in the face. Are you asking someone to do something? Exclamation mark. Can you be nicer? Exclamation mark. It's a bit disrespectful. However, even though he was angry, George Stacy still knew the importance of the matter. He finally decided to personally take a few of his men and General Ross to capture the escapee. He wanted to see who was so blind that he dared to escape to the jurisdiction of his righteous chief Stacy. When George Stacy saw the strong soldiers from the military and the weapons they were equipped with, he suddenly felt that he had brought too few people, but now there was no time to dispatch troops, so he could only go ahead with his head point. But what George Stacy didn't expect was that the capture process was unusually smooth. Blocking the area, observing the target, shooting and paralyzing, The whole operation was almost done in one go. Seeing the gentle and even a little thin Bruce Banner being tied up by the soldiers and carried out of the laboratory building of Greyburn College, George Stacy turned his head and looked at General Ross. That's it. What you mean by extremely vicious? What you mean by crazy? What you mean by very dangerous? General Ross ignored George, who looked surprised and puzzled, and walked quickly to the stretcher. If you make it disappear, I will make your life worse than death. General Ross leaned over and warned Bruce on the stretcher in a low voice. Chapter 16 Iron Man is on his way. General Ross knew that Bruce came to Greyburn College to find a way to cure Hulk, and once Bruce succeeded, the invincible Hulk that General Ross had been thinking about would disappear from this world, and all his efforts would be destroyed. General Ross ordered his men to take Bruce to the helicopter and keep him under strict supervision, and then stopped his daughter Betty. Unfortunately, Betty already knew that it was because he wanted to study Bruce's body to copy the Hulk as a military weapon that Bruce had been on the run for so long. The father-daughter relationship between the two, which was not very harmonious, also came to an end at this moment. In the laboratory building, Bronski was very angry. He injected the enhanced serum just to fight Bruce Banner again, but Bruce couldn't transform. He looked at Dr. Samuel Stern, Mr. Blue, who helped Bruce research the cure, and took out a pistol and pointed it at him. I want you to make me like Banner. Otherwise, Bronski said, pulling the hammer handle at the end of the pistol. The clear voice reached Dr. Stern's ears, but he kept staring at Bronski's strange body. It seems that something has been injected into your body, right? Dr. Stern seemed a little excited. Not enough. I want more. I want to be like Banner. I don't know what your body is like now. If you are injected, the mixture may cause you to become a hideous monster. Bronski directly lifted Dr. Stern up with one hand. He mistakenly thought that Stern was unwilling to do what he said and planned to teach Stern a lesson first. I didn't say I wouldn't help you. I just explained the situation to you first. George Stacy watched the target of this arrest operation being escorted by soldiers to the helicopter and taken away. Although he was very dissatisfied with Ross's attitude, at least he completed the task successfully. However, just as he was cooperating with the soldiers left at the scene to deal with the end, the sound of soldiers shouting and fierce gunfire suddenly came from the laboratory building. Bang! A medical bed was thrown out of the window of the laboratory building and hit the wall of the opposite building and then fell down, followed by a huge figure jumping down from the broken window. George Stacy and the policeman he brought with him saw this huge monster with no clothes and yellow-green all over. They were shocked and finally understood the real reason for what General Ross said before. The soldiers around him seemed to have experienced such a scene before. Although they were surprised, they continued to attack the monster. Bronski, now he should be called Disgust, looked down at the soldiers in front of him who were as weak as before and kept firing and provoking him. With a cruel smile on his lips, the serum plus gamma rays amplified his negative emotions. He only wanted to destroy and kill. Although General Ross had a complete fallout with Betty, he successfully captured Bruce Banner in this operation. Now he just wanted to go back and start studying and copying his super soldiers. As for his daughter, let's talk about it later. But when he heard his men report that Hulk appeared on the street, he looked back at Bruce Banner, who was sitting in the cabin and talking to his daughter HMM. What's going on? Who is the one here? If Hulk is outside, I haven't heard that he can split himself. Absolutely impossible. Stay calm first and report your current position. Ross gave orders into the intercom and at the same time ordered the pilot to turn back. He wanted to see what was going on. When he saw the real-time images transmitted by the soldiers on the scene on the display, he instantly guessed the true identity of the monster in the picture. The abomination had already run to Broadway Street. He was wreaking havoc on the street, lifting the cars next to him, or throwing or smashing them. Anything that stood in his way was destroyed by him, and innocent civilians were either dead or disabled. Those usually sturdy cars were like toys in front of him at this moment, and they were crushed with a punch. The streets were full of fleeing people, shrill screams, and flames caused by car explosions. Swoosh! A rocket shot straight at the face of the abomination. The soldiers thought it could cause considerable damage to him, but who knew that the rocket was grabbed by the abomination like a toy. The abomination grabbed the rocket that still maintained a strong thrust and slammed it into himself. Bang. After the explosion, the smoke and dust dissipated, and the remaining flames of the explosives entangled the abomination's body. Combined with his abominable appearance, he looked like a demon from hell, and coupled with the cruel sneer at the corner of his mouth, all the soldiers on the opposite side felt cold in their hearts. Bruce Banner looked at the unstoppable abomination on the display screen and realized that only Hulk could stop him now. He ignored Betty's obstruction and planned to jump off the helicopter to force Hulk to show up. Shit. Bruce Banner, who was in midair, opened his eyes and found that he was still himself. The next second, he fell heavily into the ground, and his life and death were unknown. Tony has been very happy and annoyed recently. In the past, all kinds of women wanted to get into his bed. Since he revealed that he was Iron Man, now even men want to get into his bed. However, he has not been living a life of luxury during this period. Since he chose to be a superhero, he is naturally very busy. In addition, he also plans to restart the Stark Industrial Expo. But only the two of them know whether he is worrying about these trivial matters or whether Pepper is worrying about him. No. When Tony was busy working on his suit at home, Jarvis's gentle tone appeared again. Sir, I think you should take a look at this. A virtual light curtain appeared in front of Tony's eyes, and what was playing on the screen was the scene of Abomination wreaking havoc in New York. It's time to get to work, Jarvis. Tony's eyes flashed as he looked at the demon-like hatred. New York. Queen Scene had just returned home from get off work. Natalie had been on a business trip recently and hadn't seen her for several days. Oh. Scene, you're finally back. Oh my god. Mary, who was spinning in circles in the corridor, rushed towards Scene as soon as she saw him, hugged Scene and cried bitterly. Hey, calm down, Mary, what's going on? Hearing Scene's concerned voice, Mary started talking about the reason intermittently. It turned out that Peter and his school happened to organize a study tour today, and they went to Grayburn College. When Mary saw what happened there on TV, she was afraid that Peter was in danger, but didn't know what to do. I have been waiting in the corridor for Scene to come back. After listening to Mary's narration, Scene understood what happened among the many voices in an instant, and also caught Peter's voice. By the way, the little guy was very excited now. He was with his classmates in their class. There was a heated discussion about what had just happened in the laboratory of Grayburn College. After learning that Peter was fine for the time being, Scene led Mary into his home and comforted Mary to sit down. Scene, I know you were a very good bodyguard before. I want to ask you to help me bring Peter back. Can you? Please. Mary looked at Scene with rain in her eyes and begged, don't worry, didn't the news just say that? The monster just did some damage in the laboratory and has now left the college. Peter and the others should be fine for the time being. You rest here first. I will go to Grayburn College now. Over there, help you bring Peter back. Okay. Scene gently wiped away the tears on Mary's face, gently stroked Mary's beautiful face, and soothed Mary's emotions. Mary felt the warmth of Scene's big hands, and when she heard that Scene was willing to go to such a dangerous place to help her, she finally couldn't suppress her inner emotions at this moment. Iron Man is on his way. Chapter 17, Yellow Fatty vs. Green Fatty. In Grayburn Academy, Peter Parker was still discussing excitedly with his classmates, who were a little scared about what the monster might be. On the other side of the street, because the military weapons could not cause any harm to the abomination, General Ross ordered his soldiers to retreat to prevent the angry abomination from causing more casualties to them. But this would be equivalent to exposing the people who were still on the scene directly to the abomination. George Stacy watched the monster constantly destroy the city under his jurisdiction, and their army actually began to retreat. He greeted General Ross's mother in his heart, and then thought that as the director of the New York Police Department, he should stand up at this time. So he resolutely rushed out from his hiding place. I will take care of what you military can't do. Stacy, are you crazy? It's dangerous over there. Come back quickly. The deputy beside him saw Stacy suddenly rushing out and shouted loudly, but there was no response. George Stacy is worthy of being the New York Police Commissioner. Perhaps because of his police uniform, the people felt a little more confident when they saw him rushing up. Stacy calmly arranged and directed the crowd on the street to evacuate and kept gesturing to the people who were looking out of the buildings on both sides of the street, signaling them not to be impulsive. In this way, the crowd on the street soon began to evacuate in an orderly manner. The abomination, who was still wreaking havoc, also noticed something was wrong. After getting this power, he felt extremely excited and satisfied when he saw the shocked and frightened expressions of those tiny people in front of him. But now the crowd suddenly evacuated faster and faster, and even the buildings on both sides, which had a steady stream of people running out, were now all closed. Abomination looked at George Stacy, who was still directing the crowd at the other end of the street, and instantly realized that this guy had disturbed his good mood. George Stacy had been paying attention to Abomination, and he naturally saw that Abomination had discovered him. So he urged the people around him to speed up and leave, but he stood there with a gun pointed at Abomination. Seeing George Stacy's actions, Abomination grinned and looked at the little policeman with disdain. "Since you are so arrogant, I will be merciful and send you to see God." Just when Abomination was about to attack George Stacy, suddenly, a roar came from behind. Abomination looked back excitedly. That was Hulk's voice. It was his opponent. Finally appeared. Bruce Banner just fell from the helicopter and failed to transform successfully. Instead, he fell into the ground. If a normal person fell from that height to the ground, he would have been bloody and smashed into a pool of mud, but Bruce fell directly into the ground. It was obvious that Hulk strengthened his body and saved his life. After the transformation was completed underground, Hulk finally climbed out with his bare hands. Bronski was beaten by Hulk twice before he became Abomination. This time he got such a powerful power to become Abomination, so he naturally wanted to get it back from Hulk with interest. The Abomination followed the Hulk's voice like a shark following blood, and when Hulk saw the ugly body of the Abomination rushing towards him, he roared and rushed towards the Abomination. Bronski was a soldier with rich combat experience. He ran forward as the Abomination and hugged Hulk and crashed into the ground. After rolling on the ground for a few times, he threw Hulk out and smashed him on the street. Ha 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 ha, come on. The Abomination stepped on the burning car, as if he couldn't feel the temperature of the flames. He laughed and opened his hands to continue inviting Hulk not far away on the ground, with a tone full of the pleasure of revenge. Hulk stood up from the ground dizzy, his head buzzing from the fall just now. Due to previous treatment, Hulk's power has been somewhat suppressed. In addition, Blonsky's incarnation of Abomination is a combination of enhanced serum and Hulk's blood. His body is slightly larger than Hulk's, and his various skeletons are also very prominent. There were still bone spurs in places such as the elbow spine, so Hulk was at a disadvantage in the first confrontation. But Hulk was still very smart. When he saw Abomination standing there leisurely waiting for him, he roared and raised his arms to hit the police car on one side, splitting the police car from the middle, then holding one in each hand and clapping his fists like a boxer's glove. George Stacy, who hurried over, saw his police car being so trashed. He was shocked and angry. He couldn't help but greet General Ross's mother in his heart again. Damn it, these monsters came out of nowhere. Seeing this, Hulk threw away the wreckage of the police car in his hand and punched the Abomination lying on the ground in the face, knocking his head off. "Is that all you can do?" The Abomination turned around and spat to the side, looking at Hulk with disdain. Then he raised his big foot of unknown size. A left kick. Biu Hulk was kicked out and smashed into a distant building. The Abomination got up and followed closely, and with one leap, he climbed up the outer wall of the building, where Hulk had smashed a big hole. The residents in the building looked at the terrible appearance of the Abomination on the outer wall and retreated in fear. Seeing that Hulk was suppressed, General Ross ordered the machine gunner on the helicopter to open fire immediately. "Who are you shooting at, sir?" The machine gunner was a little confused. They both looked like they were not easy to mess with. "Help, the greener one. Can't you see? Hurry," Ross urged. The machine gunner then manipulated the large electric mosquito coil in front of him. The bullets swept around the Abomination at an explosive rate of fire, attracting his attention. Ross, the Abomination, turned around and saw the helicopter shooting at him and Ross in the cabin. He temporarily put down the Hulk and climbed to the roof with his hands and feet. The flying bullets followed the footsteps of the abomination like rays and hit various objects on the roof. The abomination moved forward quickly on the roof, dodging the helicopter following behind him. When he saw the helicopter above his head finally reached a certain distance, a hint of a grim smile appeared at the corner of the abomination's mouth, and he jumped towards the helicopter. General Ross then realized that he had fallen into Bronski's trap. He was deliberately luring them over. After all, although the abomination was strong, he could not fly. Facing the long-range attack of the helicopter, he could only be used as a target. But once he got close to him, the helicopter would become a toy in his hands. At the critical moment, Hulk's figure flashed out from below and grabbed the feet of the abomination. Although the helicopter was still caught by the abomination, he had no chance to destroy the helicopter because of the harassment of the Hulk below. Hulk climbed on the body of the abomination to attack him, and the abomination also used his free hand to keep pulling the Hulk on his body. As the abomination and the Hulk kept wrestling under the side of the helicopter, the power of the two drove the helicopter to start rotating and falling, and finally crashed into a ruin with broken walls and ruins. Hulk got up. In the previous fight with the abomination, he was also injured in several places on his body. Even the skin that bullets could not penetrate was torn several times, which showed the strength of the abomination. Fortunately, those wounds are now recovering slowly. He had just taken 2 steps towards the helicopter, ready to check on his girlfriend and cheap father-in-law, when a figure immediately jumped out from the wreckage of the helicopter. It was Abomination, and he was still alive. Abomination was obviously in a better situation than Hulk. Just as he was about to attack Hulk again, a voice suddenly rang out in the venue. "Hey, is this a masquerade? Why didn't anyone invite me?" Chapter 18 The Troublemaker. Everyone turned their heads around to look for the source of the sound. At this moment, a figure in the sky hit the center of Abomination and Hulk like a cannonball. As the black cloak slowly fell, everyone could see clearly that it was a person falling from the sky. In the center of the cracked ground, Scene slowly raised his head and looked at everyone on the field. He was now wearing a set of black tights with dark patterns. There were silver bands on the wrists, waist and the edges of the boots. The black cloak connected to the tights at the collarbone, and his face was covered with a black mask with irregular edges. Where did the clown come from? Get out of my way. Abomination looked down at the tiny Scene and sneered disdainfully. He was now thinking about killing the little green fat man on the opposite side. He had no interest in Scene who interfered. General Ross also felt very strange when he saw this person who suddenly appeared. Others saw the fight between Hulk and Abomination and ran as far as they could. This guy took the initiative to move up. And what was he wearing? And the cape. Is this an opera performance? However, General Ross was very curious about Scene's appearance. This kind of gravity acceleration from the sky is not something that ordinary people can bear. Seeing that Scene was still standing there, the Abomination was too lazy to talk anymore. He jumped down from the wreckage of the helicopter and slapped Scene. "Stop." George Stacy, who came in a hurry, saw the Abomination attacking an ordinary person and shouted with his gun. Poor George Stacy's police car was smashed by Hulk, and there was no helicopter to take. He relied on his 2 old legs to get here. He didn't see what happened before. As soon as he arrived, he saw the Abomination attacking Scene. Betty, who was holding General Ross, also screamed and closed her eyes. She was afraid of seeing the bloody and miserable Scene, so she buried her head in his cheap father's side. Click, bang, bang. After 3 consecutive noises, General Ross looked at the Scene in front of him and felt that his cognition was broken again. This is impossible. He murmured. In his heart, Hulk is the strongest single soldier. Today, the Abomination appeared and fought Hulk equally and even suppressed him. Although there was a reason, it was already surprising to him. As a result, another person who came out of nowhere suddenly appeared and took the attack of the Abomination so lightly. It turned out that when the Abomination slapped him just now, Scene stood there without dodging. In his eyes, the movements of the Abomination were like slow motion. When the Abomination slap was about to hit him, he raised his left arm to take the powerful blow. At the same time, George Stacy aimed at the Abomination and fired a shot. Although he knew it had no effect, he hoped to attract the abomination's attention and give the opera singer a chance to escape, but the result he saw now was obviously beyond his cognition point. As for the third sound, it was actually Hulk. Although Hulk was not very smart, he did not like Abomination, so he wanted to stop Abomination. He originally planned to rush over to save Scene, but he did not expect Scene to take root like an iron tower. Hulk directly hit Scene's back, making a muffled sound. "You are quite strong." Ignoring the Hulk behind him, Scene looked at Abomination and smiled faintly. Abomination's pale yellow pupils shrank, followed by inner anger. Losing to Hulk before was fine, but now he has become a monster. In order to get the power to defeat Hulk, but he can't even beat a normal person. "No, I don't believe it." Abomination roared and raised his knee to hit Scene, but was blocked by Scene with one hand. Ross, who was watching the battle next to him, had already seen that Abomination's strength was not at the same level as this mysterious man. Although Abomination's attack in anger had lost its rules, its strength was much stronger than normal. But the mysterious man was able to block almost every attack before the Abomination was about to hit him, and he blocked it effortless. Compared to the huge body and huge fist of the Abomination, the mysterious man's body was like a child, but in terms of strength and speed, the two were completely opposite. Hulk behind Scene was a little dazed at the scene in front of him. He couldn't figure out how this black little guy blocked him just now, and how he could block the Abomination now. George Stus's mouth was open, so wide that a light bulb could be stuffed in. If it weren't for the sound of air explosions from every fist-to-palm collision that kept echoing on the field, he would have doubted whether the yellow monster in front of him was really performing an opera with the man in the black cloak. No, impossible. The Abomination stopped attacking and looked at Scene, who was several times smaller than him, in a daze. "Don't fight anymore? Are you tired already? I haven't even started to move." Scene twisted his neck, then turned around and looked at the Hulk behind him. "How about you come? Or both of you come together?" Scene's face was covered with a mask, so his expression could not be seen, but everyone present could hear the teasing in his tone. How could this be tolerated? Hulk, who had been in a state of rage, really rushed forward like the Abomination just now and punched randomly. Too slow. His speed and strength are not as good as the ugly guy behind. The few people watching were completely confused. Who was this guy? Which side was he on? Why did he hit the Abomination and then the Hulk? Moreover, facing the army's powerful firepower, Abomination and Hulk were almost unstoppable, being played with like two children in front of him. General Ross was shocked and also had a strong interest in Scene. If every soldier in his army could have this, no, even if it was only half or even a quarter of Scene's strength, how powerful would his army be? The important thing is that Scene looks like an ordinary person, which is very important for soldiers fighting on the battlefield. After all, if soldiers are like Abomination and Hulk, some tasks cannot be sent to them. Hulk kept roaring. His anger value kept rising. He had never met such an opponent. Scene can now clearly feel that Hulk's power has long surpassed Abomination. If Hulk fights Abomination again, Abomination will probably be beaten so hard that his mother won't recognize him. It seems that Abomination can't recognize his mother in this ghostly look now. Just as Hulk kept punching Scene, Abomination rushed up again. Good. Now that's more like it. Scene dodged the Abomination's sneak attack and laughed. Although Scene was fast, he couldn't stand up to the opponent's many hands and feet. Although he could still block the attack. After all, two fists could not beat four hands. He finally stopped being so nonchalant and occasionally turned his head and dodged the Abomination or Hulk's punches and kicks. At this time, Scene really got serious as the three of them continued to fight and move. The surrounding broken walls and ruins were destroyed more thoroughly by them, and there were cracks everywhere. Moreover, Scene no longer used the BO force field to control the airwaves generated by the collision of flesh, which caused several people watching to be blown away, and George Stus's police hat was blown to some corner by the airwave. Hulk. The furious Hulk raised his fists and slammed them hard into the ground, causing the ground to crack in Scene's direction. He wanted to use this move to limit Scene's movement. That's a good move, but it's a pity. Scene took the attack from the Abomination and dodged it. Instead, the abomination, who was focused on attacking Scene, stepped on it and got stuck. With one leg caught. The abomination turned his head and glared at Hulk fiercely. Hulk didn't want to be outdone and roared at the abomination apostrophe, "What are you looking at? Look at you, you big idiot." Chapter 19. You kid. Call it done. Scene clapped his hands and looked at Hulk and Abomination lying on the ground. It turns out that just when Abomination and Hulk were looking at each other affectionately, Scene flew forward and fell to Abomination with a knife. "You just attacked me. Don't talk about martial ethics." As for Hulk, Scene thought that Nat Haley would pick him up in the future and suddenly felt that his green suit was dazzling. So he taught him a set of military boxing. Hulk is stupid, his mouth is crooked, his eyes are crooked, and he has lost several teeth. In the end, Scene also passed on his secret of one move and his unique martial arts skill, teasing the vaginal foot. Just when Hulk covered his crotch and roared hoarsely, Scene walked around behind him again and held a knife in his hand. It's good to be young. Just fall asleep. Hulk fell to the ground softly and his body began to shrink rapidly. After the green gradually faded, Bruce Banner woke up. "If I were you, run away now. Otherwise they will surround you later, and it will be difficult for you to leave again." Scene frowned and reminded. He just heard a somewhat familiar voice, so he turned his head and looked in that direction. As he looked over, there was a graceful figure hiding not far away. Bruce, who had a few teeth missing in his mouth and a swollen face, looked at Scene with lingering fear. He had witnessed the entire fight just now, but he had no control over his body. He was very aware of what was happening in front of him. What kind of power is contained in the mysterious man's body? But he doesn't understand why Scene did that to Hulk. Do they have a grudge? After hearing Scene's reminder, Bruce also realized that now was not the time to question or speak. He had already heard the sound of the helicopter. I was afraid that the police and military were already on their way. He stood up and grabbed the loose bag with one hand. He held up his trousers and covered his crotch tightly with one hand. He felt as if his leg was broken. After observing the situation from left to right, Bruce crossed his legs and ran toward a corner of the ruins, letting out a low growl as he ran. Several people who had been thrown away by the airwaves caused by the fight found that the ruins were completely quiet. They also began to slowly approach there. Before they could see the situation in the ruins, they heard a huge sonic boom. There was also an airwave that followed, and then they saw a figure flying towards the sky. "Quick, follow that guy who flew away for me. I want to know where he went. I will try my best to find him at all costs." General Ross realized that the flying figure was probably the one who flew away. That mysterious man, while running towards the ruins, he pointed at the sky and gave orders to his men, who were coming. All that is left in the ruins is a ground full of cracks and the hatred lying there with unknown life and death. The police and soldiers who rushed over with various weapons pointed at the yellow monster on the ground, fearing that it would wake up again and violently injure people. The helicopter was hovering in the night sky, and several beams of light emitted from it were looking for the other two figures, but nothing was found. "Where is Bruce?" Betty couldn't help but ask, not noticing her old lover. General Ross was only filled with unwillingness and anger at this time, so he did not answer his daughter's words just now. His men came to report that they had not tracked the flying figure. The mysterious man disappeared, as if he had never appeared. There was no indication on the radar, and there was no trace of the Hulk at the scene. This time he caused such a big mess in New York, and all he got in the end was the hatred he despised the most. This made Ross feel like he shot himself in the foot. George Stassi, who was bareheaded, called for backup from the New York Police Department. Seeing that the fight at the scene had ended, he was now leading a group of police officers to finish. "General, a UFO is approaching quickly, General." Ross was overjoyed when he heard this. He thought he had discovered the mysterious man just now. He was just about to order an interception when he heard a mean voice coming from the communication channel after a buzzing sound. What followed was a red metal figure trailing a trail of flames in midair. "Hello, General Ross. Good evening. Wow, look at this mess. What did I miss? Are you having a party here? Who is that naked but on the ground? Is it your new male favorite, Stark?" In the mirror space, Scene changed his clothes and appeared in Grayburn College. Looking at his current appearance, no one could have imagined that he had just fought 2 monsters in the ruins not far away. Scene. Why are you here? Let me tell you, today is so exciting. Just now, the army and the police appeared together. They seemed to be arresting someone. Then, suddenly a monster fell down with a bang. P.S. It was really ugly. Then the army started firing, but it was no match for the monster. I suspect that the military is secretly conducting some ulterior human experiments. That monster was researched by them, and the military is dispatched this time to catch it. But he was as ugly as he was ugly. He was really powerful. He injured many people and then ran into the street. We kept hearing the sound of dong 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 dong. I wonder if the military used some large weapons. Small mouth doesn't talk. Peter. Scene really couldn't stand Peter's continuous talk, so he made a gesture to silence him. Oh, okay, but why are you here? Peter was interrupted and obviously had something to say. It's all because of you. Everything that happened here was on the news, and May was almost worried to death. Scene rolled his eyes. Oh, but my classmates and teachers. Peter shrank his neck embarrassedly when he thought of May's worry about him and looked back at the teacher, who had fainted on the ground and had not woken up yet, as well as the group of students who were either scared or excited. Just as the two were talking, a large number of police arrived one after another to start cleaning up. The fainted teacher was taken away by an ambulance. It was said that he had suffered severe mental stimulation and his psychological quality was not as good as that of a child. All the remaining children were taken over by the police. If someone came to pick them up, they could be taken away after verifying their identities. If no one came to pick them up, the police would eventually find out their addresses and send them back. Scene drove all the way to Queens. Peter was sitting in the passenger seat, who was using Scene's phone to report to May that he was safe. Scene had no intention of getting involved in the fight between Abomination and Hulk. Peter had nothing to do anyway, so he could just go to Grayburn College to pick him up and leave. But he suddenly thought of the conversation between Natalie and Black Egg. He thought it would be a good idea to create an identity to distract their attention. He also wanted to test the extent of his power now. Scene. May is looking for you. Peter handed over the phone. There are thousands of roads, but safety is the first. If you drive irregularly, your loved ones will shed tears. Please tell her that it is not convenient to pick her up by car now. Let's talk about it when we get back, May. Scene said you are his relative. Peter hung up the phone immediately after he said that. Scene glared at Peter, who was grinning. You kid. Are you so good at grasping the key points? Question mark. Chapter 20. You are a mighty and majestic man who leashes horses. If there is anything new in New York recently, it must be the battle that happened in Upper Manhattan not long ago. And the upcoming Stark Industrial Expo. Originally, there was basically nothing that could be called explosive news after the news of the Stark Industrial Expo came out, but just recently, that battle happened on Manhattan Island, and even Iron Man himself was there. Now everyone in New York is discussing the course of the battle, saying all kinds of things. Some people say it was mutants, some say it was robots, some say it was military experiments, and some say it was demons from hell. Rumors are flying everywhere, but most of them are guesses. The rising sun spreads its warmth and light to the earth. Scene stands at his post with his eyes closed, enjoying the gift of the sun. Recently, the entire group is busy with the Industrial Expo, and everyone went to the expo to help. There are basically no people in the group, so he is very free, but he is not very busy. Does this count as slacking off during work hours? Be careful or I'll sue you on behalf of the company's legal department. A sweet voice broke Scene's tranquility. Scene opened his eyes and looked at Natalie, who was wearing a black silk skirt and a professional suit. He felt a little embarrassed because he had really felt May's passion during this period. I understand, but he thought about Natalie's identity and the fact that she would fall in love with the big green fat man, and immediately threw the embarrassment behind his mind. When did you come back? I came back before, but I had some things to deal with at home and didn't come to work. Natalie answered fluently without any panic. I heard that a lot of things happened in New York recently. Yes, the Stark Industrial Expo is about to open, and the battle in Upper Manhattan has made people panic. Scene spread his hands helplessly. So, what happened in Manhattan that day? Natalie was very gossipy. I don't know very well either. It seemed to be over when I went there. Walter, you were there that day? Natalie stared at Scene with wide eyes. Yes, Peter happened to go to Greyburn College to participate in an event that day. The news said that the monster ran out of Greyburn College, so May was very worried, so she asked me to pick Peter up. When I found Peter, the police came out to clean up the mess. Natalie listened to Scene's words and compared them with the situation she knew in her mind. She found that what Scene said was right. There was indeed no suspicion. I don't know what Nick Fury was thinking. He had to suspect Scene before. By the way, the people who are good at doing things have already given Scene a nickname for his new vest point. Although no one observed Scene playing with the Abomination and the Hulk at close range that day, someone took a picture from a distance. Some people saw him in black, coming and going without a trace, and helping to stop the two monsters who were causing damage, so they called him Black Shadow, which means Shadowman. Washington, D.C., SHIELD headquarters, Triskelion Building. Nick Fury looked at the several report documents on the desk in front of him and rubbed his eyebrows in annoyance. It was a troubled time. He put the documents in front of him aside and picked up the one at the bottom, which was stamped with a red steel stamp of top secret. This document only had one sheet of paper. In the upper left corner was a clear aerial photo of Scene in black clothes and black mask that day. There were only a few words on the paper. Shadowman, code name, is about 6.3 feet tall, estimated, and his origin is unknown. Maybe not human. He appeared out of thin air in the battle in Upper Manhattan, fell from the sky, and suppressed Hulk and Abomination with his own strength, then flew away, and disappeared out of thin air. According to his current performance, he has superhuman strength, speed and flying ability, and can avoid radar detection, invisible, and it is not clear whether what was exposed is his full strength. Nick Fury put down the documents and took out a BB machine from his body. Looking at the red and blue spliced painting on it, he thought for a while and then put it away. There was a loud bang in the sky and Tony made a brilliant appearance. He was late to the Manhattan Island battle that day. Although Iron Man was also mentioned in the subsequent news reports, the space was not large. Most of the content was about the mysterious Shadow Man, which made Tony feel that he was being robbed of the limelight. As Tony Stark, the outspoken bird, how could he tolerate this? So he stepped up his urging and finally officially held the Stark Industrial Expo, which successfully attracted the attention of all parties at the Stark Industrial Expo. Dynamic music played throughout the venue, and the dancers on the stage were wearing Iron Man's sexy cosplay costumes and dancing hot dances, which feasted the eyes of the male audience below. The figure with the tail of flame in the sky landed at the front of the stage in a superhero way, and everyone in the audience began to shout excitedly. As the mechanical arm extended from the stage gradually stripped off the Iron Man suit, Tony looked at everyone proudly and made a scissors hand gesture. Scene stood backstage and looked at several emotional beauties in the audience. My god, why is there water flowing down their legs? It's so sexy. It's unclear whether Scene was talking about Tony or someone else. After the music ended and the dancers left the stage, Tony began his self-praising opening remarks amid the cheers of the audience. I didn't say that the world can maintain a long-term state of peace because of me. Scene closed his eyes backstage. And the family understands. He was just sitting in the sun and watching the group, but he was drafted. Now he has to work overtime and watch such a sexy and eye-catching performance. He really misses May's soft and fragrant bed. Walter, are you moved by my touching speech? Tony, who walked off the stage, looked at Scene's closed eyes and asked proudly with a smile on his face. Scene opened his eyes and looked at Tony, who was acting so mean, and wanted to give him a heat ray. Seeing that Scene's pupils were turning red, Tony thought of the pierced iron bastard and immediately changed the subject and said, relax, I'll take you to have some fun in a few days. Say happy. Just when Scene was about to ask Tony what he was having fun with, Happy came over. The car is already outside. A deep voice came out of Happy's mouth. Tony looked at Happy, who suddenly became serious and didn't know what was wrong with him. Actually, it was because Tony called Scene again. Happy felt that his position was in jeopardy when he saw Scene. He had learned all of Scene's past experiences. His dazzling bodyguard resume made his fat body tremble. "It's a mess outside now, be careful," Happy said dutifully. When the three of them finally got out of the crowd, Tony and Scene already had several more business cards of beautiful women in their hands. Happy looked at the business cards in Scene's hand and was really jealous. Forget about his boss Tony, a famous billionaire and playboy, and beautiful women offer themselves to him wherever he goes. But how come even this guy has it? What about me? Exclamation mark. I'm such a mighty and majestic man. Chapter 21. The maker of ex-wife. Do you get a beautiful model for free when you buy a new car? Tony said teasingly when he saw a slim beauty standing next to his new sports car. "Hi, beauty. What can I do for you?" Tony had a confident smile on his face. "Law enforcement officer, I have something for you." The blonde beauty introduced herself with a smile, but her eyes kept staring at Scene, who had a good figure. "Hi, my name is Sarah." Sarah gently put her hair behind her ears, let Tony pass, raised her bright face and greeted Scene. "Hello, Scene Hunter." Scene nodded politely. "Hello, Scene. Nice to meet you." Sarah blinked, and her light smoky makeup exuded an alluring charm. "Me too." Seeing the two people staring at each other, as if no one was around, Tony instantly felt that his new sports car was no longer attractive. It couldn't even attract a girl, so what was the point of it? "Hello. I'm still here. Do you want me to get you a room?" Tony complained bitterly. "Isn't it just a little taller, stronger and more handsome?" "Oh, sorry. Here, your court summons." Sarah handed over the summons in her hand embarrassedly, and her eyes still glanced at Scene next to her from time to time. Tony looked at the summons with a constipated look on his face, and Happy helped him take it. Tony had roughly guessed the reason for it. Not long ago, he learned from his good friend Rod that some people were trying to steal his battlesuit, and this summons was probably a signal point. But Tony was not afraid. After all, his identity was there, and those people only dared to test him in this way. He had already thought about how to deal with it. Sarah told Tony that he was ordered to attend the hearing of the Senate Armed Services Committee in Washington at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Tony knew that Scene didn't like the limelight of going to court, so he didn't plan to take Scene with him. "Given your performance just now, I decided not to take you on a one-day tour of Washington." Happy, who was sitting in the passenger seat of the sports car, looked at Scene with a smug look on his face. When he heard this, he felt that he was the closest person to the boss. "It doesn't matter. Besides, your new sports car can't seat 3 people. Scene pouted his lips in disdain and looked at the convertible sports car with the roar of the engine. Tony drove away in the sports car, leaving only Scene and the beautiful law enforcement officer Sarah. "Do you want to have a drink? There is a good pub downstairs in my house." Sarah straightened her chest. Scene raised his mouth and looked at Sarah, who invited him. Well, not bad. Very straightforward. Just when Tony was driving a sports car on the highway, Scene was also driving. The body lines of his car were smooth, and the sound of the engine was loud and loud for a long time. Scene heard Tony's news again a few days later, but it was Pepper who contacted him. In these few days, Stark Group has officially announced the appointment of the new president, Pepper Potts. "Hi, Pepper. Congratulations. You are the new president. You are my top boss now. What do you want to talk to me about, big boss?" "Come on, Scene. Others don't know. Don't you know? I'm a warrior. I called you to discuss with you. I'm going to ask you to be the security consultant of the group. You are basically not required to do anything at ordinary times, but I may need your help in some special times. What do you think?" Pepper's tone was not arrogant, because she became the president, and she also knew that Scene was special. "So, I'm going to get a promotion and a raise without having to work. That's like retiring early. This is really great. I knew it was a wise decision to find you as a backer." Scene decisively chose to lie down. "Thank you for the compliment. Since you agreed, I would like to invite you to go with me and Tony on this trip to Monaco. We have prepared another gift for you." "Another gift? Okay, then for the sake of the gift." Scene thought that Tony seemed to have said before that he would take him to have fun. It seems that this trip to Monaco should have been planned long ago. Europe, Monaco, racing scene. Dressed casually, looked so casual sitting in the passenger seat, as if he really came to Europe for vacation. I think I can wear this next time. Anyway, I'm not the president now. Tony, sitting in the back seat of the car, pulled the tie on his neck uncomfortably, looking at Scene's comfortable casual clothes and said enviously, "That won't work. Even if you are not the president, it won't work. Your every move will affect the Stark Group." Pepper immediately rejected Tony's request. "What impact can wearing casual clothes have?" Tony whispered. "What did you say?" Pepper frowned and looked at him. Okay. Mr. President has the final say." Tony suddenly lost his confidence when he thought about the surprise he might bring to Pepper later. Just as the two were bickering, they arrived at the hotel. "This is Europe, so no matter what happens, remember to let it go." Tony began to give Pepper a shot of precaution before entering the door. "What do you mean?" Pepper looked puzzled and turned to look at Scene and Happy, who was carrying a box. Scene smiled. He had seen what Tony called "let it go" in the hotel. "I guess he probably arranged a surprise for you." It was not until Pepper saw the bright and graceful figure coming towards her that she understood what Scene meant by surprise. "Mr. Stark, did you have a good trip?" Natalie, wearing a deep V dress similar to her hair color, greeted with a smile and paused when her eyes swept over Scene. Scene did not disturb Natalie's work. He walked to the bar alone and asked for a glass of lemonade. Drinking was not interesting to him, so it was better to drink water. "Hello, I'm Christine from Vanity Fair." A sweet voice came from behind Scene. Scene looked at the blonde girl who came forward and felt that he had some impression of her. "Hello, Scene Hunter." As a reporter, Christine has a keen sense of smell. When Scene and Tony entered the door, she observed the new face next to Tony and Pepper, so when she saw Scene alone, she decided to take the initiative to find out. "Ah, you a friend of Tony Stark?" Christine lifted her golden hair, but before Scene could answer her question, a guy wearing glasses rushed over in a hurry. "Hey, who are you?" "Christine is here to interview me." After saying that, he reminded the blonde beauty next to him with a righteous look. "Don't be fooled. Look at how this guy's dressed. He is probably a European tramp who came here to eat and drink for free, since he made a fool of himself at the hearing." Justin Hammer finally made an appointment with Vanity Fair magazine to save his image, and he didn't expect that such a beautiful reporter would come. He knew that Tony Stark would attend the Monaco car race, so he specially arranged to bring Christine with him. On the one hand, he could get some relationship with Tony and let the magazine write something good about him. On the other hand, he could show his strength to this blonde beauty so that she would take the initiative to throw herself into his arms. As a result, he went to the toilet several times because of frequent urination. When he came out, he saw that the blonde beauty, who was almost in his pot, was actually chatting with a tall, handsome and young man. How could he tolerate this? "Do you have an invitation, sir?" Justin Ham looked at Scene arrogantly. Scene looked at the guy with slicked back hair and glasses and remembered who he was. Justin Hammer, the boss of Hammer Industries, the famous ex-wife missile maker. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22. I'm also a person of status. What happened? Scene. Tony and Pepper also heard Justin Hammer's loud voice. They didn't want to answer him at first, but when they saw that the other party was Scene, they came over to ask. "Nothing. Someone suspected that I was a European tramp who sneaked in to eat and drink for free." Scene smiled and didn't care much about Justin Hammer's clown behavior. Scene didn't care, but Tony and Pepper did. Not to mention that Scene is now a member of the Stark Group. The fact that Scene saved Tony and Scene's mysterious ability are enough to make them pay attention. "Oh, isn't this Hammer whose contract was just cancelled by the military?" Tony's mouth was still as sharp as ever, piercing the lungs. "The contract is just suspended. Do you know each other?" Justin Hammer's voice lowered, and he realized that he seemed to have done something stupid. "This is our group's new consultant, Mr. Scene Hunter." "Oh, By the way, there is a gift for you, Natalie. Tony looked at Scene and said mysteriously. Seeing Natalie approaching affectionately, Scene half jokingly said, "You are not going to give Natalie to me as a gift, you witch." Tony rolled his eyes. "This is my new personal assistant, and what she holds in her hand is your gift." Tony introduced Natalie to Scene proudly and raised his eyebrows proudly, as if to say, "Look at our assistant. She is much prettier than the blind law enforcement officer that day." Mr. Stark gave part of his group shares to Mr. Scene Hunter as a gift. "This is the equity transfer agreement." Natalie looked at Scene. She was actually very confused in her heart. Although Scene did save Tony's life, it was not worth Tony's generosity, right? Christine, who had just chatted with Scene, covered her mouth in surprise. As a reporter for Vanity Fair, she knew the value and significance of these shares very well. The people watching the excitement around were also surprised by Tony's direct gift of shares, just like Christine. Scene glanced at Tony's chest when he heard this. The dense toxins looked very bad. He had already started to arrange his funeral. Although the shares Tony gave him were not many, they were very valuable. Now the shares of Stark Group cannot be described as rising all the way, but they were rising all the way. These shares will only become more and more valuable. As the palladium content in the blood increased, the poisoning became more and more serious. Tony may have felt that he didn't have much time left. Giving away the shares was a reward for thanking Scene for saving his life. Secondly, he probably wanted Scene to help him protect Pepper in the future. Thinking of this, Scene glanced at Pepper, patted Tony on the shoulder, and signaled with his eyes. Tony saw Scene's eyes and felt that Scene seemed to know the truth. As Scene signed his name on the agreement, from this moment on, he became a shareholder of Stark Group, and he was also a person of status. Scene knew that Tony would definitely not die this time, but this share was just a drop in the bucket for Tony, so he would rather not give it up. Besides, he hadn't been paid for the private work he had done before. Natalie looked at the man in front of her, and she suddenly wondered if she had made a wrong judgment about Scene before. Natalie, ahem. Natalie. Tony looked at Natalie staring at Scene, and felt that, if he didn't speak, the newly hired personal assistant would also run away. "I'm here, Mr. Stark. Is there anything else?" Natalie regained her professionalism in a second. "It's okay, you go first." Tony looked at Natalie, who was bright and beautiful and obedient, and left. Fortunately, the little assistant is still mine. Just after Natalie left with her waist twisted, Pepper looked at Justin Hammer, who was already dumbfounded, and said unceremoniously, "Mr. Hammer, I hope you will clean your glasses in the future, so that at least you won't recognize the wrong person." Ha 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 ha. "I was just joking with Mr. Hunter just now." Justin Hammer laughed awkwardly, and then quickly changed the subject and said, "Oh, by the way, this is Christine from Vanity Fair magazine. This is a new president of Stark Industries, the famous Pepper Potts. With this new shareholder of Stark Group, this is big news." Justin Hammer introduced solemnly, complimented Pepper, and by the way, wanted to win a little favor from Christine. Of course Christine knew who Pepper was. She once had a good interview with Tony. At that time, Christine had a brief confrontation with Pepper in Tony's mansion. Unexpectedly, in a blink of an eye, the little housekeeper Pepper Potts in her eyes had become a person she could not reach. However, as a reporter, Christine had seen all kinds of embarrassing scenes. She immediately took advantage of the situation and said to Pepper, "Of course I know. Please give me a chance to interview you. Otherwise my editor-in-chief may beat me to death." Please. Scene looked at Christine's pitiful and humble expression and said, "It's really not easy in any profession." Sure enough, Christine's pretending to be pitiful worked, and Pepper softened her heart and agreed to her, and then said that she would go to the bathroom to touch up her makeup first. Justin Hammer saw that no one mentioned his rude behavior just now, and he began to put his arm around Tony and wanted to take a photo with him, which would also be of great benefit to the publicity of his Hammer Industries. "Oh, God, please stop. I can't stand it. It's too disgusting. Let's go quickly." Scene. Tony pulled Justin Hammer's sticky claws hard, patted the place where he had grabbed with disdain, and quickly pulled Scene away. "I can't stand this shameless guy." Tony complained irritably. "Really? More shameless than you?" Scene said with a smile. Tony looked at Scene with resentment. You. No, right, Tony. Suddenly looked around and then asked in a low voice. He knew that Scene had some mysterious abilities. How long? Scene glanced at the arc reactor on his chest. It's been a while. As long as I continue to use the Iron Man suit, the process will be accelerated. Tony suddenly felt helpless. He didn't expect that the device that saved his life at the beginning would become his death warrant in the end. If you had come to me when you first discovered it, I might have a solution. Now the situation is too bad, and I can't do anything. Scene looked at Tony apologetically. Really? Then I have to enjoy myself during this period. Tony suddenly laughed, feeling like he had given up. Seeing Tony like this, Scene reminded him, maybe there is a solution. Believe me, I have tried all the permutations and combinations, and there is no alternative at all. Tony is still very confident in himself in scientific research. Maybe, not all. Scene smiled mysteriously. What do you mean? Tony frowned and looked at him. All you said is just all the known ones. So what about the unknown ones? Scene stopped talking and said no more. What do you mean by unknown ones? You don't know. So how can I know? You have to learn to discover it yourself, and don't always think about relying on others. Although Scene's words made sense, Tony still wanted to beat him up. Chapter 23 Lightning 5 Whips. Tony was still thinking about the unknown that Scene had mentioned when he got on the car that belonged to him. Is there really an unknown element that can replace palladium? Tony shook his head vigorously. He felt that Scene was like someone who knew nothing about science. He felt that Scene would definitely not understand how low the possibility of discovering a new element was. As the indicator lights on the track alternated, Tony drove the car out. The extreme speed left all the troubles and Scene's words behind. Now Tony only had the track in his eyes. Just when the passion was full on the track, the news that Tony Stark would personally participate in the game was also flying all over the sky. Pepper looked at the news broadcast on the TV of the hotel and shouted to Natalie, "Do you know about this?" Natalie is Tony's new assistant. Pepper thought that this was arranged by Tony. I just found out about it. Natalie shook her head, obviously not knowing. Pepper's mind flashed back to the outrageous things Tony had done before. When she was an assistant, she was always confused. Seeing Pepper's dazed look, Natalie took the initiative to ask, "What can I do for you?" Pepper's consciousness returned and she immediately said, "Please call Happy over for me. I need him." Just as Natalie turned to leave, Pepper added, "After you find Happy, help me find Scene." Scene. Natalie turned back and agreed, while thinking about why she called Scene. At this time, a bloated maintenance worker opened the track guardrail and walked straight in. The onlookers exclaimed at his desperate behavior. The man took off the maintenance worker's special helmet on his head, and there was no panic in his eyes when facing the racing car speeding by. He pulled open his bloated orange maintenance suit, and as the TV broadcast gave a close-up picture to his chest, a round device similar to the arc reactor was exposed. Then his orange maintenance suit began to catch fire and two long whips extended from his open arms. The audience realized that this man did not want to commit suicide at all. The reactor on his chest began to supply energy, and the double whips in his hands began to jump and flash arcs. Ivan Vanko slowly walked forward, facing the high-speed car, and raised his hand to whip it. The front and back of the car was suddenly split into two, and the cut was glowing red and smooth. The cut car rolled on the track and finally hit the guardrail with a bang, causing a burst of fire. The staff outside the guardrail immediately started to put out the fire and evacuate the onlookers nearby. Scene. Where are you? My god. Someone rushed into the stadium. Happy and I are driving to the stadium now. Tony is still inside. I don't know why he suddenly went crazy and ran to the race. He didn't take his box. Now it's with me. Pepper was talking to Scene incoherently on the phone in the back seat of the car. Calm down, Pepper. I'm here. Don't worry. Scene. Watch the broadcast on TV. Ivan Vanko had cut open Tony's car, which was coming towards him. Tony was trapped in the overturned car. Ivan Vanko waved his whips, whipping the ground with crackling sounds, and slowly approached Tony. Just as Ivan Vanko used his 5-whip lightning whip, a cry came from the crowd. What is that someone pointed at the bucket-shaped cloud that suddenly formed in the sky, and a sonic boom like thunder came with the cloud point as the sound rang out. A straight line fell from the sky and headed straight for the stadium point, and on the other side of the ocean, an alarm sounded in the Triskelion headquarters of SHIELD. Sir, you have to see this. Coulson rushed into Nick Fury's office and was about to report the cause of the alarm, but found that his old boss was already watching. Nick Fury's one eye was fixed on the screen in front of him, which showed the scene that had just appeared on the Monaco court. Is it him? Nick Fury asked in a deep voice. The data set has been matched, and the possibility is more than 90%. After listening to the report of his subordinates in the headset, Coulson immediately conveyed it to his old boss. Is Agent Romanov on the scene now? Nick Fury saw Tony Stark's name appear on the screen. Yes, sir. Contact her on the Monaco court. Ivan Vanko used the arc whips in his hands to wantonly wield the hatred and anger in his heart. His father Anton Vanko once studied the arc reactor with Tony's father Howard Stark. Howard Stark became the father of the military industry of the United States, gaining both fame and fortune, while his father had to spend his life in poverty in the cold Siberia, and eventually died miserably. The reason for all this was that Howard Stark had ordered his father to be expelled. This made Ivan Vanko hate the Stark family so much that he wanted everyone in the Stark family to pay the price. One whip. Oh. Ivan Vanko looked at the car that he had cut in half, but did not see Tony Stark's body that was cut in two. Bang. Just as Ivan Vanko was looking out, he was attacked from behind by Tony, who had already escaped, holding a piece of the car shell wreckage. Damn. The Stark family really has no martial ethics. Crack. Ivan Vanko whipped Tony with his backhand, knocking the car wreckage out of Tony's hand. Tony, who had lost his makeshift weapon, could only dodge and move constantly to avoid Ivan Vanko's double whip. 3 whips. 4 whips. 5 whips. After rolling several times, Tony, who sat on the ground with his legs apart, was sweating profusely, looking at the scorched marks on the ground, which were only about 10 centimeters away from his second brother. Seeing that his strongest lightning 5 whip could not take down Tony, Ivan Vanko raised his double whip again and swung it at Tony Stark, who stood up and ran away, intending to have another round. The crackling sound of the arc struck again, but this time Ivan could not take back the whip he swung. Who are you? Ivan looked at the man in black clothes, black mask and black cloak in front of him with a surprised face, especially since he was holding his whip with his bare hand. Scene held the whip tail with his left hand, and the arc did not cause any damage to his hand. Tony thought he would be hit this time, and he ran forward 2 steps before he heard Ivan Vanko's voice behind him. When he turned around, he saw the figure that suddenly appeared on the field. Ivan Vanko waved the long whip in his other hand in disbelief, and the whip hit Scene's body with a burst of sparks. Tony shouted behind Scene to be careful until he saw Scene standing there intact. He noticed that Scene's left hand had been holding the whip tail of another long whip. Although it doesn't feel anything to me, I'm not a masochist. If you come again, I will fight back. Scene's tone was very flat, as if he was chatting with an old friend. But Ivan Vanko keenly discovered that his attack not only did not cause any damage to Scene, but even the black tights with dark patterns on Scene's body did not leave any trace. Ah, you the one on the internet, Shadowman? Tony recognized Scene's clothes. He was late for the battle in New York, but he was still a little concerned about this Shadowman who came out of nowhere and stole his limelight. Should I call you Iron Man or Tony Stark? Scene turned around and looked up and down at Tony, who was in a mess. Tony coughed twice, and he could hear that Scene was mocking him for not wearing an iron suit. It was also at this time that Happy finally drove to the scene with Pepper and saw the 3 people on the field from a distance, and Happy stepped on the accelerator and crashed into them. No. Chapter 24. Try to cut him in the middle. When Tony found that his car was rushing from the opposite side, he shouted loudly, "No," but it was too late. Happy stepped on the accelerator into the fuel tank, and the car body knocked Ivan Vanko into the guardrail, but the front of the car was heading towards Scene. Behind Scene was Tony. Seeing that he had no time to dodge, Tony could only use his hands and feet to climb onto the iron net of the guardrail. trying to keep his body higher from the ground and not be hit by the front of the car at the moment of the collision. The powerful kinetic energy made the entire rear of the car fly up. Pepper in the car felt that her body was suspended in the air, covering her eyes, and screaming loudly. Happy was hit by the airbag that popped out in front of him, and his head was a little buzzing. Bang, as the rear of the luxury car fell safely. Tony realized that Scene pressed his hands in front of the car and stopped the car from rushing at high speed. What Tony didn't know was that Scene used some biological force field to save the car. Otherwise, if Happy had hit it at the speed he was driving just now, the car would have been destroyed and the people in the car would have been injured. Now, after Scene's operation, the car was only slightly hit. At this moment, Ivan Vanko, who had just been knocked to the guardrail, also climbed up. He recognized Pepper in the car at a glance, and then turned his head to look at Tony. With a cruel smile on his lips, he was seen waving the long whip in his hand and slashing at the backseat of the car with all his strength. No, Tony looked at Pepper in the car and screamed heartbreakingly, but the scene of being split into as he expected did not appear in front of him. Confused, Tony looked up and found that Scene had flown into the air at some point and took the shocking whip again. You pervert, you are really annoying. Didn't I just say that I'm not a masochist? Ivan Vanko was stunned by Scene's words. I didn't hit. Bang. Scene's figure disappeared in the air and suddenly appeared where Ivan Vanko had just stood. Ivan Vanko, who should have been there, was embedded in the guardrail behind him after the loud noise. The guardrail, which had been hit several times, endured the force it should not have endured, and finally changed its shape. Fortunately, Ivan Vanko was wearing a double whip armor to reduce some of the damage, and Scene's attack just now did not use much force, just lightly touching him, otherwise he would have eaten the feast at this time. Happy, drive the car over. Pepper, give me the box. Tony, who had reacted, immediately turned around and ordered the two people in the car. After experiencing a frightening scene, Pepper in the backseat held her head and shook it, then cursed and threw the box out. Tony looked at the battle suit that slid in front of him, stepped on it to start the mechanism, held the two handles raised by the box with both hands, and put the whole box on his chest, and the box instantly began to extend towards his body. With the movement of countless pieces of armor, Tony finally put on his iron suit. The crowd burst into cheers at this moment. After all, Tony Stark and Iron Man are still very famous, at least more famous than Scene's new vest. Stay away, Tony said to the two people in the car, and then looked at Scene and Ivan Vanko on the other side. Who are you? Why do you want to save Tony Stark? Ivan was injured and did not speak English. Before Scene answered him, a voice of weight came from the side. He wants to kill you. You want to save him? Scene was a little confused. No, I want to deal with it myself. Tony's firm voice came from under the mask. Scene shrugged indifferently, stepped aside, and began to stand by and watch the battle. Ivan Vanko, who was trapped in the guardrail by Scene, was a little desperate. His original plan was that, if he could kill Tony, it would be the best, and because of the device he had on him to kill Tony, someone would definitely protect him, even if he couldn't kill him. As long as someone saw him fighting Tony's iron armor, those who had grudges against Tony would come to him like sharks smelling blood, and then he would have more and better opportunities. But he didn't expect Cheng Yaojin to appear halfway. And he didn't even touch the hair of Tony's iron armor. Now Tony Stark actually took the initiative to come to the door and ask for death. Isn't this exciting? Ivan Vanko didn't even spit out blood, struggled hard to get out of the guardrail, spit a mouthful of bloody phlegm on the ground, and looked at Tony, who was wearing the battle suit, with contempt. Tony raised his hand and was ready to end the battle with a palm cannon. But he didn't expect Ivan Vanko to know him very well. The long whip hit Tony with an arc of electricity. The intense heat made Tony stagger. The attack that was not fully charged was directly invalidated. Even the armor plates on the arm of the iron suit were melted by the high temperature of the long whip, revealing the racing suit inside. Tony continued to raise his hands, and Ivan Vanko continued to whip. Every time Tony's attack was interrupted by the long whip, before it was formed. Scene, who was standing aside, shook his head and couldn't help saying, "You are really stupid to death." What? Although the attack has not worked, Tony's suit can still withstand Ivan's attack, and he still has the leisure to answer Scene's words. Have you never played games? What is the advantage of archers? No, but Pepper and the others are still there. Scene understood that the reason why Tony was unwilling to fight at a distance was because of Happy and Pepper in the car behind him who had not left. You still don't understand what I mean. Do you think archers are all fragile? If you can't keep the distance, then get closer, master. Tony, try to cut him in the middle. Scene said seriously. Point originally, with Tony's IQ, he could have thought of it even without Scene's reminder, but Scene really couldn't stand his masochistic look of being whipped all the time. Ivan Vanko was not a fool. He naturally knew that with Tony's iron armor, as long as he got close to him, he would definitely lose in a melee. Although he had a backup plan, he didn't dare to guarantee that he would survive now. He could only take a gamble. Ivan Vanko turned the long whip hard and chopped Tony with all his strength. The whip with arcs instantly wrapped around Tony's neck. He wanted to behead Tony directly in front of everyone. Tony looked at the various damages to the armor in front of him and called the police. Crisis is a danger and an opportunity. He grabbed the whip and used his steel armor to resist the damage of high temperature, constantly shortening the distance with Ivan Vanko, and finally knocked this guy down with one punch. After getting close, Ivan Vanko lay on the ground with a buzzing head. His only hope now was to save his life, so that he could have a chance to turn the tables. Wouldn't it be better to send him to God directly? Scene saw Tony violently dismantling the reactor on Ivan Vanko's chest, thinking that this guy might come back later, and reminded him he has lost the ability to resist. Tony looked at the intelligent analysis of the reactor in his opponent's body in front of him, and didn't know what he was thinking. Whatever you want, don't blame me for not reminding you when the time comes. Who are you? Tony turned his head and looked at the mysterious man wearing a mask and whose identity was unknown. Forget about the previous New York incident. This time Scene's appearance was simply inexplicable. Combined with these two battles, Scene's strength was terrifyingly strong. Such an unknown person made him feel uneasy. A friend. Scene smiled. Spider web-like cracks appeared on the ground, and muffled thunder sounded again in the sky. Chapter 25. All magicians are like this. Has Agent Romanov reported? I have already reported. It's not that person. Has the report been confirmed? Carlson looked up at Nick Fury, not understanding why he asked this question. He had never asked before, but Carlson still answered diligently. It has been confirmed. Someone saw him at the time of the incident, and the surveillance also captured it. Nick Fury narrowed his single eye. Monaco, in the hotel lobby. Where did you go just now? Miss Potts asked me to find you. Natalie trotted forward and looked at Scene, who came out of the hotel with a worried look. I didn't go anywhere. The reporter from Vanity Fair said she wanted to interview me, and then I chatted with her for a few words. Later, I saw on the TV broadcast that something happened at the stadium and she left. I have been watching the news broadcast in the hotel. Scene answered innocently. Scene knew that Natalie was looking for him, not only because of Pepper's request, but also to deliberately inquire about his whereabouts. Fortunately, Scene used her confusion magic to create an alibi when he left just now. With this, no one can connect him with the shadow man who appeared in the arena. Natalie stared at Scene. She had been in the hotel just now, but she obviously didn't see Scene. However, she still planned to check the surveillance later. Where are Tony and Pepper? How are they now? Scene changed the subject and shifted to Pepper and Tony. Mr. Stark is bringing them back. Miss Potts was a little frightened. I have arranged a room to wait for them. As the two were talking, Tony and the others returned to the hotel. Pepper, are you okay? Seeing Pepper's haggard face when she got off the car, Scene walked up and asked with concern. I'm fine, thank you. Pepper forced a smile. Tony, who had taken off his battlesuit, looked at the two of them on the side, but what he thought in his heart was, the play is really good, and the pretending is really fucking real. When the mysterious shadow man left just now, Tony clearly saw a hint of red in his eyes, exposed under the mask. This red Tony is very familiar. He had just seen him not long ago, so he had already guessed the identity of Shadowman Point. After comforting Pepper, Scene looked up and saw Tony's meaningful expression. He knew that he had discovered his deliberate flaw and blinked at him without saying a word. Tony knew that Scene had always been very mysterious, from the magic that saved him the first time to the powerful strength shown by Shadowman Point, but he also knew that Scene had never harmed him, at least not yet. Go back to the room and rest first. I have to change clothes. Tony knew that Scene didn't want to expose himself, and now was not the time to talk about this, so he turned his head and looked at Natalie, motioning her to lead the way to the room first. Scene knew that Tony changed his clothes because he was going to the police station to have a good talk with the arrested Lightning 5 Whips. After all, it is a piece of clothing that belongs to you. One day when you are walking on the street, someone suddenly wears the same piece of clothing as you. Although his imitation is not as good looking as yours, you know clearly in your heart that this piece of clothing cannot be made by others. In this case, everyone will want to figure out what is going on. Scene estimated that this is one of the reasons why Tony did not kill Ivan Vanko. What? Change clothes? Where are you going? Pepper asked immediately when she heard that Tony was going out alone. I have to figure out some things. Tony thought about the fake arc reactor that he had just crushed and said with narrowed eyes, Scene, can you go with him? Pepper wanted to stop Tony, but when she saw him suddenly look so serious and thought of the device used by the person who attacked Tony, she could only turn her head and look at Scene. Okay, you have a good rest. I will go with him. It's not good to take money and not do it. After the two arrived at the police station, they didn't need to reveal their identities at all. The chief of the police station came out to receive them in person. Tony's face was like an ID card wherever he went. When he heard that they wanted to visit the prisoner who had just been arrested on the court, the chief also agreed, but reminded them that this person was very dangerous. It's okay, my bodyguard is invulnerable to swords and guns, and is invulnerable to water and fire. Tony patted Scene's pectoral muscles and said to the chief proudly. Scene rolled his eyes and didn't bother to pay attention to him. He was really a conspicuous bag. I should have known not to tell him earlier. The chief looked at Scene in casual clothes and felt that, although this guy was a little stronger and more handsome than himself, it was too much to say that he was invulnerable to swords and guns and invulnerable to water and fire, right? He even secretly criticized the famous Tony Stark in his heart. Wouldn't he have a hobby in that area? Thinking of this, the chief couldn't help but tighten his anus. If Tony knew that his words had caused the chief to misunderstand him like this, he would probably slap himself twice and ask the chief to take a piss and look at his bald head. The chief, who had recovered from his shock, nodded and bowed, no longer taking Tony's words to heart, but he still called several strong men from the police station. So, under the protection of several burly police officers, Scene and Tony walked towards the cell where the prisoner was held. The chief led the way and said with some shame that the police had not yet found out his identity because the guy didn't say a word after being arrested. Tony didn't care about this either. He planned to ask in person. I'll go talk to him myself. You wait here, Tony ordered directly. When he reached the door, the director was still worried, but when he saw that Tony's bodyguard Scene didn't follow him in, he didn't say anything more. He just gave a word of advice and opened the door to let Tony in. The conversation between the two ended quickly. They got the information they wanted and some unexpected things, so Tony didn't look very good when he came out. On the way back, Scene saw Tony looking out the window with a gloomy face, so he said, you don't have to pay too much attention to what he said, huh? Tony heard what Scene said and knew that Scene had heard the conversation in the cell just now with his magical abilities, so he turned his head and looked at Scene. You just need to think about what kind of person your father is, Scene said in a flat tone. According to my understanding, although Howard Stark can't be said to be a completely good person, at least he won't hurt others for no reason. Really? I don't even know what kind of person my father is. Tony thought of the pitiful father-son time he had with his father, smiled helplessly, and then sighed. You will know. Why do I always feel like you know everything, but you don't say anything? Tony turned around and looked at Scene, trying to get him to explain point. Who knew that Scene smiled mysteriously and said, "All magicians are like this." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.